I still remember the exact shade of blue the sky was that day. Cloudless, perfect, almost mocking in its serenity as my entire world collapsed around me. It was the kind of beautiful spring day that should have been filled with possibility. Instead, it became the day that would divide my life into before and after. I just don't think this is going to work anymore, Olivia. Those words from James hung in the air between us in his sleek corner office. 48 floors up, overlooking Manhattan, the city sprawled below us like a kingdom he ruled. And I was being exiled. What do you mean? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Small. Confused? I'd come to surprise him for lunch, a reservation at his favorite restaurant already confirmed. I was his girlfriend of 3 years, his business partner for 2. The woman who had stood beside him as Lefort Capital grew from a risky startup to one of the most promising boutique investment firms in the city. James leaned back in his custom leather chair, the one I'd helped him select when we furnished this office, and gave me that look. The one that had once made me feel like the most brilliant person in any room. Now it just made me feel small. We both know things haven't been the same since the Harrison deal. My stomach twisted. The Harrison deal. My one mistake in 2 years of flawless work. A client I'd brought in, vetted personally, only to discover too late he'd falsified some of his financials. We'd recovered most of the investment, but the damage to our reputation had been real. I'd taken full responsibility, worked double time to repair relationships. That was 6 months ago, James. We moved past that. My voice steadied, finding its professional tone. The Westlake acquisition more than made up for it. Did it, though? He sighed, the sound weighted with false sympathy. Look, I'm not just talking about us professionally. I've been doing a lot of thinking about us. Personally. The shift in his tone made my blood run cold. I'd come here thinking we were discussing a business disagreement. Now I understood this was something else entirely. What are you saying? I whispered. James stood, buttoning his impeccably tailored jacket before moving to the window. Classic power move. I'd seen him do it 100 times in negotiations. Create distance. Establish dominance. Control the conversation by making the other person wait. I'm saying it's time we both move on. Lefort is at a critical juncture. We're courting serious investors, looking at a potential merger with Geller Group. Geller Group? I cut in. We never discussed that. He didn't turn from the window. The discussions began recently. Very preliminary. And you didn't think to include me? I'm your partner, James. Junior partner? He corrected, the words sharp and precise. With a 15% stake. And that's precisely why we need to have this conversation. Finally, he turned, leaning against the window with practiced casualness. Everything about James was practiced. His charm, his confidence, even the perfectly timed way he ran his hand through his dark hair when he wanted to appear vulnerable. Once I'd found it magnetic. Now I was seeing the calculation behind every gesture. They're concerned about your involvement. After the Harrison situation. They? Or you? I challenged, my heartbeat quickening. Both. He admitted with a shrug that was meant to look regretful. Olivia, you're brilliant. You've always been brilliant. But in this business, perception is everything. And right now, you're perceived as... He paused, searching for the word. The pause stretched so long I knew whatever came next would be deliberately cruel. Damaged goods. Those 2 words hit me like physical blows. First to my solar plexus, driving the air from my lungs. Then to my heart, a precise strike that left me bleeding internally. That's not fair, I managed, hating how my voice wavered. Fair? He laughed softly. When has business ever been about fair? When has life? I stood, gathering my composure even as I felt myself fracturing inside. So what exactly are you proposing? His expression softened into something resembling kindness, the practiced look of a man delivering what he considered generosity. I'll buy out your share of the company. Full market value plus 10%. A good deal considering the circumstances. You'll sign an NDA and a non-compete for 3 years? And us? The question escaped before I could stop it. 3 years together. A shared apartment? Whispered promises about a future. His eyes flickered with genuine discomfort for the first time. Olivia, that's been over for a while. We both know it, but I hadn't known. That was the thing that shattered me most completely. I hadn't known at all. When? I demanded, my voice hardening. When exactly did we both know this, James? When you took me to meet your parents at Christmas? When we looked at properties in the Hamptons last month? Or was it when you were in my bed 2 nights ago? A flash of annoyance crossed his face. James hated direct confrontation outside of negotiation settings, hated emotional messiness. It was one of the things I'd always been careful to shield him from in our relationship. "Don't make this difficult," he said quietly. "It's business. It's not personal." I laughed then, a harsh sound that surprised us both. "You're breaking up with me and forcing me out of my own company on the same day, and it's not personal? That's spectacular, even for you. The paperwork is prepared." He returned to his desk, pulling out a thick folder. "Take it home. Review it with your lawyer if you want, though it's the standard agreement we drafted last year for partner buyouts. The one I'd helped write." The irony wasn't lost on me. "And if I refuse?" His expression hardened, the mask of politeness slipping. "Then things get complicated. I hold majority control. The Harrison documentation is quite clear about your oversight failures. I'd prefer not to go that route, but I will if necessary." Blackmail thinly veiled. I felt ice forming in my veins, replacing the blood that had been boiling just moments before. "You've thought of everything," I said quietly. "It's what makes me good at what I do." Not a hint of remorse. Not a flicker of what we'd been together. "The offer is fair. Take it, Olivia. Walk away with your reputation mostly intact. Start fresh somewhere else." I took the folder, my fingers numb. "And if I wanted to stay in New York? In finance?" For the first time, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I wouldn't recommend it. My influence, well, we both know how this industry works. People listen to me." The threat was crystal clear. Take the deal and disappear, or he would make sure I never worked in finance again. 3 years of relationship. 2 years of pouring my soul into Lefort, all of it meaningless to him. I stood perfectly still, afraid that if I moved I might shatter into a million pieces right there on his expensive carpet. Or worse, I might lunge across the desk and claw at his perfectly composed face until it matched the wreckage I felt inside. Instead, I slid the folder into my bag with steady hands. "I'll have my lawyer review it. You have until Friday," he added, already turning his attention to his computer screen. Dismissing me. "The Geller meeting is Monday, and I need this resolved." I walked to the door, each step an act of will. When I reached it, I paused, turning back to look at him one last time. The man I'd loved, the man I'd trusted, the man who had just destroyed my world with surgical precision. "Why did you really do it?" I asked, needing to know. "Was there someone else? Did you just get bored? Or was it always the plan to use me until I wasn't useful anymore?" He looked up, and for a flickering second, I thought I saw something real in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or maybe just annoyance at my persistence. "It's like I said, damaged goods." He shrugged. "In business, we cut losses and move on. You taught me that, actually." I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I closed it quietly behind me and walked past Marissa, his secretary, with a polite smile. I rode the elevator down 48 floors, each number ticking by like years off my life. I walked through the gleaming lobby, past security, and onto the busy street. And then I completely fell apart. I don't remember getting home that day. I have flashes of memory, stumbling into a taxi, the concerned look from my doorman, collapsing just inside my apartment door. But most of those first hours exist in a fog of shock and pain so acute it seems my mind has mercifully erased them. What I do remember clearly is waking up on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m., still in my work clothes, face swollen from crying. I remember staring at myself in the mirror, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed woman looking back at me. Damaged goods. The phrase kept echoing in my head. 2 simple words that had reduced me from Olivia Chen, rising star in financial investment with an MBA from Wharton, to nothing. Just another disposable woman discarded when she became inconvenient. I splashed cold water on my face, the shock of it bringing me back to myself momentarily. My phone had died hours ago. I plugged it in with trembling hands, wincing as it lit up with notifications. 3 missed calls from my best friend Layla. A text from my brother asking if we were still on for dinner next week. An email notification about a deposit into my account. My last vacation days, already paid out. James had wasted no time. My existence was already being erased from Lefort Capital. Methodical. That was always his way. Identify the problem, develop the solution, execute without hesitation. I had admired that about him once. Had tried to learn from it, to temper my own more intuitive approach to problem solving with his strategic precision. Now that precision was turned against me like a weapon. I opened my laptop, my finger hovering over the keyboard. I could fight this. I had documentation, emails, proof of my contributions to Lefort. I could make things messy for him at least. But the cold reality sank in as I stared at the screen. He held majority control. He had the connections, the influence. If I fought, he would make sure I never worked in finance again. And what would I gain? A slightly better settlement, perhaps. My 15% stake was worth a considerable sum, enough to live on for a few years if I was careful. But my reputation would be in tatters, damaged goods. The phrase felt like a brand searing into my skin. How long had he seen me that way? When had I transformed from asset to liability in his eyes? I closed the laptop without typing a word. Standing on wobbly legs, I made it to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, then changed my mind and reached for the bottle of expensive scotch James had given me for my 30th birthday last year. "To celebrate your prime," he'd said, kissing me as I'd unwrapped it. The memory made me want to hurl the bottle against the wall. Instead, I poured 3 fingers into a tumbler and drank it in one burning gulp. The alcohol hit my empty stomach like a match to gasoline. But the fire was almost welcome. Anything to burn away the numbness that had settled over me. I poured another glass and carried it to the window of my high-rise apartment. The city sparkled below, indifferent to my personal apocalypse. Somewhere out there, was James sleeping peacefully? Or was he already in someone else's bed? Someone undamaged, someone new. My phone pinged with an incoming email. Against my better judgment, I checked it. From James Lafort. Subject, Addendum to Agreement. Olivia, after further consideration, I've instructed the lawyers to add a privacy clause to our separation agreement. It would prohibit either of us from discussing the circumstances of your departure from Lafort Capital or the details of our personal relationship with anyone for a period of 5 years. In exchange for your signature on this addendum, I'm prepared to increase the buyout by an additional 5%. I trust you'll see the benefit to both parties. James, no greeting, no sign-off, just business. The rage that filled me then was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, white-hot and all-consuming. I typed a reply with shaking fingers, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. What could I possibly say that would matter? That would hurt him even a fraction as much as he had hurt me? Nothing. There was nothing. I threw my phone across the room, heard it clatter against the wall. Then I sank to the floor and let the tears come again. Morning arrived with merciless brightness. I hadn't closed the blinds and sunlight streamed in, catching dust motes that danced in the air. For one blessed moment I didn't remember. Then it all came crashing back, and the weight of it pinned me to the floor where I'd apparently spent the night. My phone was chiming insistently. I crawled over to where it lay, miraculously unbroken despite my tantrum. It was Layla calling. I should answer. I should tell someone what had happened. But the thought of saying it out loud, of admitting that James had discarded me professionally and personally in the space of a 20-minute conversation, was unbearable. I silenced the ringer and dragged myself to the shower instead. The hot water didn't wash away the humiliation or the anger, but it did clear my head enough to function. I dressed mechanically in yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, then made coffee on autopilot, the familiar rituals of morning offering a fragile sense of normalcy. Sitting at my kitchen island, I forced myself to open the folder James had given me. The legal language swam before my eyes at first, but I made myself focus. I hadn't spent years in finance without learning to read the fine print. The terms were exactly as he'd described. Full market value for my 15% stake, plus 10%. A generous offer by any objective standard. The non-compete was brutal. I couldn't work in investment finance for 3 years anywhere in the United States. The NDA prevented me from discussing Lafort's business strategies, client lists, or internal operations with anyone, ever. And now he wanted to muzzle me personally as well. To buy my silence about how he'd ended things. To ensure I couldn't even tell my friends the truth. Damaged goods who needed to be silenced. My coffee grew cold as I read through every page, every clause, every carefully constructed trap. By the time I finished, something had shifted inside me. The raw, bleeding wound of betrayal was still there, but around it, something harder had begun to form. A protective shell, perhaps, or maybe the first shoots of something else entirely. My phone rang again. Layla, for the 4th time. I couldn't avoid her forever. "Hey," I answered, my voice rough from crying and disuse. "Olivia. Finally, I've been worried sick. You were supposed to meet me for drinks yesterday and you never showed or called. Are you okay?" The concern in her voice nearly broke me again. Layla had been my best friend since our first day at Wharton. She was the sister I'd never had, the one person who knew me as well as James did, maybe better. My voice caught. What was I? Devastated? Destroyed? I'm going through something. I can't really talk about it right now. What happened? Is it James? Is it work? Both, I admitted. But I can't. There might be legal issues. I just need some time. Legal issues? Her voice sharpened. Layla wasn't just my friend. She was also one of the top corporate attorneys in Manhattan. Olivia, whatever's happening, you need proper representation. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. I'm coming over. No. The word came out more forcefully than I intended. No, I need to be alone right now. Please understand. There was a long silence on the other end. Okay, she finally said, but I'm here when you're ready. Day or night. And seriously, don't sign anything without having someone review it first. I won't. I promised, though I wasn't sure if it was a lie. Part of me just wanted this over with, wanted to sign whatever James put in front of me and disappear, lick my wounds in private. I'll call you in a few days. After hanging up, I returned to the agreement. The legal terms kept blurring before my eyes, but one phrase remained crystal clear no matter how many times I blinked. Damaged goods. Not written on the pages, of course, but inscribed in my mind, in my heart, branded into my identity by the man I'd trusted most. I stood abruptly, needing to move, to do something. My apartment suddenly felt like a cage. 3 years of my life with James surrounded me. Photos on the walls, the throw blanket he'd brought back from a business trip to London, books we'd read together, all of it now tainted. I grabbed my keys and wallet and fled, no destination in mind, just away. Away from the echoing emptiness of my apartment, away from the ghost of what I'd thought my life was. The spring air hit my face as I stepped outside, the same perfect blue sky mocking me for the second day in a row. I walked blindly, letting my feet carry me wherever they wanted. After what could have been minutes or hours, I found myself in Washington Square Park, sitting on a bench, watching strangers live their normal lives. A couple arguing quietly by the fountain. A group of students sprawled on the grass with textbooks. A solitary old man feeding pigeons, his face serene. Did any of them feel like their world had ended? Did they carry wounds invisible to the casual observer? Or was I uniquely broken, uniquely damaged? My phone buzzed with a text. I expected Layla again, but it was from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. Is this Olivia Chen? This is Vivian Meyer, EA to Charles Geller at Geller Group. Mr. Geller would like to meet with you at your earliest convenience. Please call me to arrange. Geller Group. The company James was courting for a merger. The reason he'd deemed me expendable. My first instinct was to ignore it. Whatever Charles Geller wanted, it couldn't be good for me. James would have made sure of that. But curiosity nibbled at the edges of my despair. Why would Geller want to meet with me directly? Before I could overthink it, I called the number. Vivian Meyer speaking, answered a crisp, professional voice. This is Olivia Chen returning your call. Ms. Chen, thank you for getting back to me so promptly. Mr. Geller was hoping you might be available for lunch today. He has an opening at 1 p.m. at the Greenwich. I checked my watch. It was 11:30. May I ask what this is regarding? Mr. Geller prefers to discuss that in person. He asked me to assure you this is not related to the current negotiations between Geller Group and Lefort Capital. This is a separate matter entirely. My mind raced. Charles Geller was a legend in investment banking. His firm was easily 10 times the size of Lefort. What could he possibly want with me? I'll be there, I heard myself say. Excellent. I've texted the restaurant details. Mr. Geller will meet you in the private dining room. After ending the call, I realized I was dressed in yoga pants and a ratty sweatshirt. My hair was unwashed, and I probably had raccoon eyes from crying all night. Not exactly how I wanted to meet one of the most powerful men in finance. I had just enough time to rush home, shower properly, and change into something professional. The simple act of putting on a tailored black dress and heels, applying makeup to hide the evidence of my breakdown, felt like putting on armor. By the time I left my apartment, I almost looked like my normal self. Almost. The Greenwich was one of those old guard New York establishments where the real business of the city took place. Dark wood, discreet service, private rooms where deals were made over dry martinis and rare steaks. I gave my name to the maitre d', who led me to a secluded room at the back of the restaurant. Charles Geller stood as I entered. He was older than I expected, well into his 70s with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He wore a perfectly tailored gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming on such short notice. His handshake was firm, his voice a deep baritone. Please sit. I took the offered chair, acutely aware that this man likely knew exactly what had happened at Lefort yesterday. The thought sent a flush of humiliation up my neck. I appreciate the invitation, Mr. Geller, though I confess I'm curious about the reason. He smiled slightly as he sat across from me. Direct. I like that. He signaled to a waiting server who poured water for both of us. Would you like something stronger? I'm having a scotch. Just water for now, thank you. My head was clear for the first time in 24 hours, and I wanted to keep it that way. He nodded, ordered his drink, then turned those assessing eyes back to me. I assume you're aware that Geller Group has been in talks with Lefort Capital about a potential acquisition. I kept my face carefully neutral. I was informed yesterday that preliminary discussions were underway. Preliminary. He snorted softly. James Lefort has been courting us for months. We're well beyond preliminary, Miss Chen. The paperwork is being finalized as we speak. The news hit me like a physical blow. Months. James had been planning this for months, all while keeping me completely in the dark. All those late meetings, the business trips I wasn't invited to, it all made sense now. I see, I said, proud that my voice remained steady. Congratulations on the acquisition, but I'm no longer with Lefort Capital, so I'm not sure how I can be of assistance. His drink arrived, and he took a thoughtful sip before answering. That's precisely why I wanted to meet with you. Your departure from Lefort was unexpected. It raised questions. What sort of questions? I asked carefully. The kind that make me reconsider a $100 million acquisition. His gaze was direct, unflinching. You were Lefort's risk assessment specialist. Your track record was nearly flawless. One misstep with the Harrison portfolio quickly corrected. And yet James Lefort suddenly decides you're expendable. It doesn't add up. I stared at him, unsure how to respond. The NDA I hadn't yet signed hung over me like a guillotine blade. Mr. Geller, I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of my separation from Lefort. Because of the agreement James wants you to sign, he waved a dismissive hand, an agreement you haven't signed yet, if my sources are correct. His sources. Of course, someone like Charles Geller would have eyes and ears everywhere. Even so, I don't think it would be wise for me to comment. He leaned forward, those blue eyes intent. Let me be clear, Ms. Chen. I didn't invite you here to pry into private matters. I invited you here to offer you a job. Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. A job? Senior Risk Assessment Director at Geller Group, reporting directly to me. Salary twice what you were making at Lefort, plus performance bonuses and equity options. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. Mr. Geller, I appreciate the offer, but I'll be under a non-compete clause as part of my exit from Lefort. A clause that becomes void if the company is acquired. His smile was that of a chess master revealing a brilliantly planned move, which it will be in approximately 2 weeks. The timing works out quite perfectly, don't you think? My mind raced. He was right. Standard acquisition language would nullify many of the restrictive clauses in my agreement with James. It was a loophole I hadn't even considered. Why? I asked, unable to hide my suspicion. Why offer me this position? You don't know me. I know your work. I've had my team reviewing Lefort's portfolio performance for months. Your analytics, your risk assessments, your client relationship management, all exemplary. The Harrison situation was unfortunate, but hardly catastrophic. James Lefort's decision to remove you makes no business sense. He paused, studying me. Unless, of course, there were personal factors involved. The knowing look in his eyes told me he'd already guessed the truth. That James and I had been more than business partners. That my removal was personal as much as professional. Mr. Geller, he held up a hand, stopping me. You don't need to confirm or deny anything. Your personal life is your business. I'm making you this offer based solely on your professional qualifications, which are impressive. The waiter returned to take our lunch order. I hadn't even glanced at the menu, but I managed to request a salad, my appetite non-existent. Geller ordered a steak, rare. Once we were alone again, he continued, "There's something else you should know. After our acquisition is complete, James Lefort will be staying on for exactly 6 months as a consultant to ease the transition. After that, his services will no longer be required." I couldn't hide my surprise at that. He's selling his company only to be pushed out a few months later? Geller's smile was thin. James believes he'll be taking on a leadership role within Geller Group. That was never my intention. Lefort Capital has an impressive client list and some innovative investment strategies that interest me. James himself does not. Does he know that? He will. In about 6 months. Geller sipped his scotch, looking entirely untroubled by the deception. Business, Ms. Chen. Sometimes it requires a certain strategic ambiguity. The irony wasn't lost on me. James was about to experience the same kind of betrayal he'd inflicted on me, but while a petty part of me relished the thought, it wasn't enough. 6 months at Geller Group would only burnish James's resume. He'd land on his feet, probably with an even better position somewhere else. "So what do you say to my offer?" Geller asked, studying me over the rim of his glass. It was tempting. More than tempting. A prestigious position at Geller Group would be a statement, proof that I wasn't damaged goods after all. And the thought of James's face when he realized I'd be working directly with Geller while he was being shown the door. But something felt wrong. I'd be walking from one man's control directly into another's. Geller might respect my work now, but what happened when I made my next mistake? Would I find myself dismissed just as abruptly, just as coldly? "I'm honored by your interest, Mr. Geller," I said carefully, "but I need some time to consider." He nodded, seeming unsurprised. "Of course. Take a week. The offer will remain open." Our food arrived, and the conversation shifted to more general topics: market trends, emerging investment opportunities, my background before Lefort. Throughout lunch, I felt Geller assessing me, testing my knowledge, my instincts. It was an informal interview disguised as casual conversation. By the time we finished, I felt mentally exhausted but strangely energized. For a few hours, I'd been treated as a valued professional, not damaged goods to be discarded. It was like coming up for air after nearly drowning. As we stood to leave, Geller fixed me with those penetrating blue eyes one last time. "One piece of advice, Ms. Chen, whether you accept my offer or not, don't sign James Lefort's agreement. At least not in its current form. You have more leverage than you realize." Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, leaving me standing in the private dining room with my thoughts swirling. I walked home slowly, turning the conversation over in my mind. Geller's offer was generous, perhaps suspiciously so. Was he using me as a pawn in some larger game with James? Probably. But did that matter if the outcome benefited me? And what had he meant about leverage? What leverage could I possibly have against James? My phone chimed with an incoming email as I reached my building. Another message from James. From James Lefort. Subject: Agreement deadline. "Olivia, my lawyers inform me you haven't responded to their calls. A reminder that the deadline for signing the separation agreement is tomorrow at 5 p.m. After that, the terms on offer will no longer be available. I strongly suggest you sign and move forward. For everyone's benefit, James." The cold, impersonal tone rekindled the anger I'd been suppressing all day. This was the man I'd loved. The man I'd believed loved me. Now he couldn't even be bothered with basic courtesy. Inside my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at my kitchen island, staring at the folder containing the agreement. Sign it and walk away with a substantial sum. Refuse, and James would use every tool at his disposal to destroy what remained of my professional reputation. Or option 3, take Geller's job offer and watch James's face when he realized I'd landed on my feet despite his best efforts to sink me. None of those options felt right. None of them addressed the burning sense of injustice that had taken root inside me. None of them would erase those two words that kept echoing in my head. Damaged goods. My phone rang, startling me. Layla again. This time I answered. "Hey, don't hey me," she replied, her voice a mix of concern and frustration. "It's been 2 days, Olivia. Whatever's happening, you don't have to face it alone." The simple kindness in her voice cracked something inside me. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything. James's betrayal, the buyout offer, the non-compete, Geller's lunch invitation and job offer. All of it poured out in a torrent of words. When I finished, there was silence on the other end for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Layla? I'm here. I'm just..." Her voice was tight with anger. "I'm trying to decide whether to offer legal advice or help you hide James's body." A surprised laugh escaped me, the first in what felt like years. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't think murder is the answer." "Don't be so sure. I know at least 3 judges who would call it justifiable homicide." Her tone shifted to something more serious. "Olivia, as your friend, I want to murder him. As your lawyer, which I am now officially, whether you like it or not, I need you to listen carefully. Geller is right. You have leverage." "What leverage?" "James holds all the cards. Not all of them." I could hear the smile in her voice. "You said the Geller acquisition has been in the works for months? While you were still fully involved in Lefort's operations?" "Yes, but..." "And James deliberately kept you in the dark about these negotiations? While you were still a partner with fiduciary rights?" I frowned, following her train of thought. "Yes. That's a breach of fiduciary duty, Olivia. James had a legal obligation to disclose major business developments to all partners. By hiding the Geller negotiations from you, he violated partnership law." My heart began to race. What does that mean exactly? It means you could potentially sue for much more than the value of your shares. You could sue for damages related to his breach of duty, and the discovery process would force all communications about the Geller deal into the open. Every email, every text, every meeting note. That would derail the acquisition, I said slowly, understanding blooming. Exactly. At minimum, it would delay it significantly. At worst for James, it could kill the deal entirely. No one wants to acquire a company embroiled in partnership litigation. For the first time in 2 days, I felt something other than despair. A tiny flicker of, what? Hope? Power? Whatever it was, I clung to it. So what do I do? First, you don't sign anything. Second, you let me draft a response. Third, we meet with James and his lawyers and negotiate terms that don't involve you being muzzled and blacklisted. Her voice hardened. And you let me handle the talking. Because right now, I'm angry enough to make him regret he ever heard the phrase damaged goods. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my apartment, Layla's words echoing in my mind. Leverage. I had leverage. The realization was intoxicating after days of feeling utterly powerless. But was it enough? Even if Layla managed to negotiate better terms, more money, no non-compete, James would still walk away with the lion's share of Lefort Capital. He would still win in the end. Damaged goods. The phrase had taken on a life of its own in my head, driving deeper with each repetition. It wasn't just about the professional slight anymore. It was about how easily I'd been discarded, how completely I'd been fooled, how thoroughly I'd been betrayed by the person I trusted most. I moved to the window, looking out at the city lights coming on as dusk fell. New York stretched before me, a glittering landscape of ambition and power. Somewhere out there, James was probably celebrating his impending deal with Geller, confident that I'd sign his agreement and disappear quietly. The thought crystallized something inside me, a resolve that had been forming since that moment in his office when everything changed. I didn't want better terms. I didn't want Geller's job offer. I didn't want to move on and start fresh somewhere else. I wanted justice. I wanted consequences. I wanted James to understand exactly what he'd thrown away when he called me damaged goods. But how? What could I possibly do that would truly make him regret his actions? The answer came slowly, forming piece by piece as I stared out at the city. Not revenge, nothing so simple or direct, something more profound. Something that would change the fundamental power dynamic between us forever. I would build something of my own. Something so successful, so undeniable, that James would be forced to recognize my value, and then, when the moment was right, I would take everything from him, just as he had taken everything from me. The thought should have frightened me. Instead, it filled me with a cold clarity I'd never experienced before. The pain was still there, the betrayal still raw, but alongside it now was purpose, direction. I pulled out my phone and texted Layla, "Me, change of plans. I'm not going to fight the agreement. But I need you to renegotiate 2 points. No non-compete and no personal privacy clause. I'll give on everything else." Her response came immediately. "Layla, are you insane? We have leverage. We can get you a much better deal." Me, I don't want a better deal. I want freedom to build something new. Trust me on this. There was a long pause before her reply. "Layla, I don't understand, but I trust you. Come to my office tomorrow at 9. We'll work out a strategy." I set down my phone, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time since James had uttered those fateful words, I felt like I could breathe again. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with obstacles and uncertainties, but it was a path of my own choosing. Damaged goods. The words still hurt, still burned, but now they would fuel something else. Something James Lefort would never see coming until it was too late. The next morning I dressed with particular care. Black pencil skirt, crisp white blouse, my most expensive pair of heels, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, makeup flawless, armor for the battle ahead. Layla's office was in a gleaming tower in Midtown, her corner suite a testament to her success as one of the city's top corporate attorneys. When I arrived, she was waiting with coffee and a concerned expression. "Are you sure about this?" she asked after we'd settled in her private conference room. "Because we really could push for a much better financial settlement. I'm sure." The resolution that had formed last night had only strengthened with morning light. "I don't want to fight over money. I want the freedom to build something new." She studied me, her dark eyes shrewd. "This is about more than just getting out of the non-compete, isn't it? You're planning something." I met her gaze steadily. "Yes. Do I want to know what it is?" "Not yet." I wasn't ready to share my nebulous plan, still forming in the recesses of my mind. Just trust that I know what I'm doing. Layla sighed, tapping her pen against the legal pad in front of her. All right, but you're leaving a lot of money on the table. Money isn't what I need right now. She nodded, accepting my decision even if she didn't understand it. So the strategy is to use our leverage to eliminate the non-compete and the personal privacy clause while accepting the basic financial terms. I can work with that. She made a few notes. I'll contact James's lawyer this morning. We should be able to meet this afternoon. Actually, I said, I want to meet with James directly. Just him and me before the lawyers get involved. Layla's eyebrows shot up. Absolutely not. That's the worst possible. I need to look him in the eye, Layla. I need him to see that I'm not broken. The need burned inside me like a physical thing. Just a brief meeting. Then you can take over the negotiation. She looked like she wanted to argue further, but something in my expression stopped her. Fine, but only if I set it up and establish ground rules. No signing anything, no agreeing to anything. Just a conversation. Agreed. She picked up her phone, her expression hardening as she dialed. Put me through to James Lafort, please. Tell him it's Layla Washington regarding Olivia Chen. After a brief wait, her voice took on a clipped, professional tone. Mr. Lafort, I'm representing Olivia Chen in your separation negotiations. Yes, I'm aware of the deadline. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Ms. Chen would like to meet with you privately before our legal teams engage. 1 hour, my office? No, that's non-negotiable. My office, 1 hour. I'll send you the address. Thank you. She hung up, a satisfied gleam in her eye. He'll be here at 11. And he's not happy about it. Good. The thought of James being inconvenienced even slightly gave me a petty thrill of satisfaction. Layla arranged for me to use a small meeting room down the hall from her office. I'll be right outside if you need me, she assured me. And remember, no matter what he says, you have leverage. Don't let him intimidate you. I nodded, though intimidation was the least of my concerns. The anger that had been building inside me was a shield against fear, against self-doubt. I was past being intimidated by James Lafort. At precisely 11, the receptionist showed him in. He looked exactly as he always did, impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, dark hair perfectly styled, his expression a careful mask of professional neutrality. The sight of him sent a jolt through me, part pain, part rage, part lingering attraction that I despised myself for feeling. Olivia. He remained standing, one hand in his pocket in that casual stance he adopted when he wanted to appear relaxed, but in control. I was surprised by your request. I thought we'd concluded our discussion. Evidently not, since I haven't signed your agreement. I gestured to the chair across from me. Please sit. This won't take long. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face at my commanding tone, but he sat, adjusting his cuffs in that habitual gesture I once found endearing. If this is an attempt to renegotiate the financial terms, I should tell you that it's not about the money, I interrupted. The financial terms are acceptable. That caught him off guard. He studied me with narrowed eyes, trying to read my angle. Then what is this about? The non-compete clause and the personal privacy addendum. Both need to go. He laughed, the sound holding genuine amusement. That's not happening. The non-compete is standard protection for the company, and the privacy clause is mutually beneficial. Mutually beneficial? I repeated, allowing my incredulity to show. How exactly does it benefit me to be silenced about how you ended our relationship? It prevents either of us from damaging the other's reputation. I would think you'd appreciate that protection. What I'd appreciate, I said evenly, is not being muzzled after being discarded like trash. What I'd appreciate is the freedom to build a new career without artificial constraints imposed by someone who called me damaged goods. He had the grace to wince slightly at that. That was perhaps not the most diplomatic phrasing. No, it wasn't. But it was honest, wasn't it? It's how you see me. James sighed, adopting the patient expression he used when explaining complex concepts to clients. Olivia, this is business, not personal. I valued our relationship, both professional and private. But Lafort Capital is at a critical juncture, and I had to make decisions in the best interest of the company. Decisions you'd been planning for months while keeping me in the dark. Decisions that violated your fiduciary duty to me as a partner. His expression hardened. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. You deliberately concealed the Geller Group negotiations from me while I was still a partner with legal rights to that information. That's a breach of fiduciary duty, James. One that could lead to a lawsuit that would derail your precious acquisition. The flash of alarm in his eyes confirmed Layla's assessment. He hadn't expected me to identify this vulnerability. "That's a stretch," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Preliminary discussions weren't preliminary at all, according to Charles Geller." James went very still. "You've spoken to Geller?" "We had lunch yesterday." A most illuminating conversation. I kept my voice neutral, letting him wonder exactly what had been discussed. "He seems to value my expertise more than you do." For the first time, I saw genuine uncertainty in James's expression. Good. Let him worry about what I knew, what I might do. "What do you want, Olivia?" he asked finally, all pretense of casual control gone. "I told you. Remove the non-compete and the privacy clause. I'll sign the rest as is." He studied me, trying to discern the trap. "And that's it? You walk away with the buyout money and the freedom to work wherever you want, including for our competitors?" "That's it." "Why would I agree to that when I hold all the leverage?" I smiled, the expression feeling foreign on my face after days of despair. "Because you don't hold all the leverage, James. I could file a breach of fiduciary duty lawsuit today. The discovery process alone would delay your Geller acquisition by months, possibly derail it completely. Is enforcing a non-compete against me worth losing a $100 million deal?" His jaw tightened, the only outward sign of his anger. "You wouldn't I? You've made it clear our relationship meant nothing to you. Why would I hesitate to protect my own interests now?" We stared at each other across the table, the air between us charged with the remnants of what we'd been to each other. Lovers, partners, now adversaries. "Fine," he said finally. "I'll remove the non-compete and the privacy clause. But the rest stands, including the NDA regarding Lefort's business operations." "Agreed." I stood, signaling that our meeting was over. "Layla will work out the details with your lawyers. I expect the revised agreement by end of day." James rose slowly, buttoning his jacket in that deliberate way he had. "You've changed," he observed, a note of something like respect in his voice. "Yes," I agreed. "It turns out being called damaged goods by someone you trusted is quite transformative." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "For what it's worth, I regret using that phrase. It was unnecessarily cruel, but not inaccurate in your view. It wasn't a question." He didn't answer directly. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Olivia. Whatever that may be." "Oh, I will." The certainty in my voice surprised even me. "You can count on that?" After he left, Layla burst into the room, her expression a mix of concern and admiration. "I heard everything." That was impressive and slightly terrifying. "Thank you, I think. He'll honor the agreement," she said, sitting in the chair James had vacated. "He can't risk the acquisition." "But Olivia," she hesitated. "What exactly are you planning?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I'm still figuring it out myself." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But whatever it is, I'm here when you need me, both as your lawyer and your friend." "I know." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, grateful beyond words for her unwavering support. "And I'm going to need both before this is over." The revised agreement arrived by courier at 4:30 that afternoon. Layla reviewed it thoroughly, confirming that the non-compete and privacy clauses had been removed entirely. The rest remained unchanged, a fair market buyout for my shares, plus the 10% premium James had initially offered. The only remaining restriction was the standard NDA regarding Lefort's proprietary business strategies and client information. I signed without hesitation, a weight lifting from my shoulders as I did. Not because I was relieved to be free of Lefort Capital, though I was, but because signing represented the first step in my nascent plan, freedom to build what would come next. "It's done," Layla said, countersigning as witness. "The funds should be transferred to your account within 3 business days." I nodded, staring at my signature on the page. The formal end of one chapter in my life. The beginning of something else entirely. "Now what?" Layla asked, organizing the documents for her files. "Now I need some time. To think, to plan." I stood, gathering my purse. "And I need to decline Charles Geller's job offer." Layla's eyebrows shot up. "You're turning down a senior position at Geller Group?" "Olivia, that's not what I want. I was certain of that, at least. Taking that job would just be moving from one man's control to another's. I need to build something of my own." She looked like she wanted to argue, but simply nodded. "It's your decision. Just promise me you'll be careful. Whatever you're planning, James Lefort isn't someone to underestimate. Believe me, I know that better than anyone." The bitter truth of that statement hung between us. "But neither am I." On my way home, I called Vivian Meyer and politely declined Charles Geller's offer, expressing my gratitude for his consideration. She sounded surprised, but assured me she would convey my response. Minutes later, my phone rang. Charles Geller himself. Ms. Chen. Vivian tells me you're declining my offer. Yes, Mr. Geller. While I appreciate the opportunity, I've decided to pursue a different path. May I ask what path that might be? I hesitated, staring out the taxi window at the New York streets flowing past. I'm not entirely sure yet, but it will be something of my own creation. There was a thoughtful silence on the other end. I see. Well, should your plans change, the door remains open. Talent like yours is rare in this industry. Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you. One more thing, Miss Chen. James LaForte is not a man who takes defeat gracefully. Whatever you're planning, be prepared for resistance. The warning surprised me. You seem very certain I'm planning something. His chuckle held genuine amusement. I've been in this business for 50 years. I recognize the look of someone who isn't simply walking away. Good luck, Ms. Chen. I suspect we'll cross paths again someday. After ending the call, I sat back in the taxi, turning Geller's words over in my mind. He was right about James, and about me. I wasn't walking away. I was moving toward something else, something still taking shape in the recesses of my mind. Back in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. For the first time in days, I felt clear-headed, focused. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath my breastbone, but it no longer consumed me. I began to research, to read, to make notes. Investment trends, market gaps, potential opportunities. The buyout from LaForte would give me approximately $3.2 million after taxes, a substantial sum, but not enough to challenge someone like James in his established domain. I would need to be smarter, more creative. I would need to identify opportunities he had missed or dismissed. And I would need allies, people with complementary skills and resources who shared my vision. As night fell, I moved to the window with my wine, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was James, probably celebrating the Geller acquisition, believing he'd dealt with me efficiently and finally, believing I was no longer a factor in his carefully planned future. The thought brought a small, cold smile to my lips. Let him believe that. Let him forget about me entirely. It would make what came next all the more satisfying. Damaged goods. The phrase no longer hurt as it echoed in my mind. Instead, it fueled a quiet determination that burned steadier and brighter with each passing hour. James LaForte had taught me many things during our years together, about finance, about business strategy, about human nature. His final lesson, delivered with such casual cruelty, might prove to be the most valuable of all. He had taught me that in business, sentiment was weakness. That decisive action, no matter how harsh, was strength. That the only truly unforgivable failure was hesitation. I would not hesitate again. End of part 1. It's amazing how quickly life can transform when you have purpose. 3 weeks after signing the separation agreement with LaForte Capital, I barely recognized my own existence. My spacious Tribeca apartment, once filled with reminders of James, had been purged, renovated, and transformed into both living space and command center. The dining room table where we'd hosted dinner parties was now covered with research materials, market analyses, and the beginnings of a business plan. The bedroom where we'd shared so many intimate moments had been repainted, refurnished, cleansed of his presence. I'd cut my hair too, a symbolic gesture perhaps, but the shoulder-length bob made me feel lighter, sharper, more focused. The woman who stared back at me from the mirror each morning looked different. Her eyes held a determination that bordered on ruthlessness. My $3.2 million buyout from LaForte had been immediately put to work. Most went into secure investments that would provide steady income while I built my new venture. The rest, approximately $800,000, became seed capital for what I was beginning to envision as Chen's strategic investment. Not the most creative name, perhaps, but I wanted my identity front and center. No hiding behind abstract corporate branding. You're insane, Layla declared when I outlined my initial thoughts over dinner at her apartment. You want to compete directly with LaForte Capital? With James? Not exactly, I replied, spearing a piece of roasted asparagus. I want to fill the gaps he's always ignored. Which are women-led businesses, for one? James always dismissed them as too emotional or lacking scalability. But the data shows female founders deliver higher ROI with less initial capital. Layla raised an eyebrow. And you happen to have this data because I compiled it at LaForte. Presented it to James twice. He dismissed it both times. His loss, she said, refilling our wine glasses. But Olivia, building a financial firm from scratch, that's a monumental undertaking. Even with your experience and connections. I know. I didn't elaborate on the sleepless nights I'd spent questioning my own sanity, the moments of paralyzing doubt that occasionally gripped me. That's why I need your help. You know I'll do whatever I can, but I'm a lawyer, not a financial expert. I don't need another financial expert. I need someone who understands corporate law and who I trust completely. I leaned forward. I want you to join me, Layla, not just as legal counsel. As a partner? She nearly choked on her wine. Partner? Olivia, I have a career. A successful one. I can't just walk away from my firm. I'm not asking you to walk away completely. At least not yet. I'm asking you to come in as a part-time strategic advisor and legal counsel in exchange for sweat equity. Sweat equity in a company that doesn't exist yet. Her tone was skeptical, but I could see curiosity in her eyes. A company that will exist very soon. And one that will succeed because we'll build it differently. Smarter. More ethically. I paused. And eventually more profitably than Lefort ever was. Layla studied me, her expression unreadable. This is about revenge, isn't it? You want to beat James at his own game? I considered denying it, then decided honesty was the better approach. Not just revenge. But yes, that's part of it. Is that so wrong? No, she said slowly. Not wrong. Just potentially distracting. Revenge can cloud judgment, or it can sharpen it. I met her gaze steadily. I've never been more focused in my life. After a long moment, she nodded. I'll help you draft the incorporation documents and operating agreement. And I'll advise on the legal structure and compliance issues. But I'm not quitting my job for a startup, no matter how brilliant the founder. I smiled, feeling the first real hope I'd experienced in weeks. That's all I'm asking. For now. By month 3, Chen's strategic investment had moved from concept to reality. I'd leased a small but stylish office in the Flatiron district, deliberately far from Lefort's Midtown headquarters, and hired a small, carefully selected team. Emily Chen, no relation, a brilliant analyst I'd tried to recruit at Lefort, but James had rejected as not prestigious enough, because she'd attended a state university rather than an Ivy League. Marcus Williams, a client relationship manager who'd been passed over repeatedly for promotion at Goldman Sachs despite his exceptional talent. And Zoe Winters, a former tech entrepreneur who understood startup culture from the inside and would help us identify promising investment opportunities. Our focus was clear and deliberately different from Lefort's approach. We would specialize in early-stage growth companies with diverse leadership, innovative business models, and strong social impact components. Areas James had consistently undervalued or overlooked entirely. I wasn't just building a business, I was building a counter-argument to his entire investment philosophy. The work was all-consuming. I arrived at the office by 7 each morning and rarely left before 10 at night. I took meetings with potential clients, refined our investment criteria, developed our brand identity, and constantly reassessed our strategic direction. In the rare moments when I wasn't working, I collapsed into exhausted sleep, too tired even to dream. It was during this period that I first began to notice James's subtle counter-moves. Nothing overt. He was too sophisticated for that. But companies I approached would suddenly receive calls from Lefort. Potential employees I interviewed would get unexpected offers elsewhere. Office spaces I toured would mysteriously be leased before I could sign the paperwork. It's not paranoia if they're really after you. Layla observed when I mentioned these patterns during one of our weekly strategy sessions. She had kept her word, providing legal advice and strategic support while maintaining her position at her law firm. James is clearly keeping tabs on you. But how? I paced the small conference room, frustration building. I've been careful about who I talk to, what I share. New York finance is a small world. People talk. She considered me thoughtfully, though I have to say his attention suggests he sees you as a threat. That's actually a compliment. I'd prefer he ignore me until I'm ready to make my move. Immediately, I regretted the phrasing. Your move? Layla's eyes narrowed. Olivia, what exactly is your endgame here? I hesitated, not yet ready to articulate the full scope of what I had begun to envision. Success. Proving him wrong about me? By competing with Lefort? For now, I said vaguely. Let's focus on the immediate issue. How do we counter his interference? She let the deflection pass, though her expression told me the conversation wasn't permanently tabled. We get more strategic, more discreet. And we do something he'd never expect, which is, we go small instead of big. She leaned forward, warming to her idea. James thinks in terms of prestige, visibility, status, so we do the opposite. We find clients who are below his radar. We build relationships he'd consider beneath him. We create a foundation he won't even notice until it's too solid to undermine. It was brilliant advice, perfectly aligned with what I'd already been considering. The invisible build? I murmured. Exactly. Layla grinned. Let him think he's winning by keeping you from the big clients. Meanwhile, you're creating something completely different. That night, I completely revised our client acquisition strategy. Instead of pursuing the same high-profile startups that would attract Lefort's attention, we focused on finding promising companies at earlier stages, particularly those led by women and minorities. Entrepreneurs who often struggled to get traditional venture funding despite solid business models. One such company was Fortis Security, a cybersecurity startup founded by Maya Jackson, a former NSA analyst. Her company had developed an innovative approach to network protection that major corporations desperately needed, but were slow to adopt due to institutional inertia. When we met for coffee, her frustration was palpable. 5 VC firms have told me my company has unlimited potential right before explaining why they can't invest, she said, stirring her latte aggressively. One actually suggested I find a male co-founder to be the face of the company. Their loss, our gain? I replied, sliding a proposal across the table. We're prepared to offer $1.2 million for a 15% stake, with an option for additional investment as you hit specified growth targets. Maya's eyes widened as she scanned the document. This is extremely fair. Better than fair. It's not charity, I assured her. It's sound investment strategy. Your technology is revolutionary. The market will catch up to that reality eventually. We're just getting in early because we recognize value others are missing. By the end of that week, Fortis Security became our first major investment. Within a month, we added 4 more companies to our portfolio: a sustainable fashion brand, an AI-driven educational platform, an urban vertical farming operation, and a healthcare technology company focused on women's health. None were the flashy, headline-generating investments Lefort pursued, but each had solid fundamentals and filled critical market gaps. 6 months in, Chen Strategic Investment had deployed nearly all of our initial capital, establishing a diverse portfolio that was already showing promising early returns. We'd expanded to a team of 11, outgrowing our original office and moving to a larger space in the same building. We'd also begun attracting attention from other investors looking to partner on deals. It was progress beyond what I'd initially projected, but still modest by industry standards. A small fish in the vast ocean of New York finance, exactly as we'd planned. Until the Wall Street Journal called. Ms. Chen? This is Rebecca Winters from the Journal. I'm working on a feature about emerging trends in venture capital, specifically the rise of firms focusing on diverse leadership and social impact. Your name keeps coming up in my research. Would you be available for an interview? The request caught me completely off guard. We'd been deliberately maintaining a low profile, focusing on building our portfolio rather than our public image. Media attention now could derail our invisible build strategy and would certainly alert James to exactly what we were doing. But refusing an interview with the Journal could be equally problematic, suggesting we had something to hide. After consulting with Layla and our newly hired PR consultant, I agreed to a limited conversation focusing on industry trends rather than our specific investments or strategy. The article, when it appeared 2 weeks later, was both better and worse than I'd anticipated. Disrupting from Within: How Chen Strategic is Rewriting Investment Rules. The headline alone made me wince. So much for flying under the radar. The piece positioned us as pioneers of a new investment approach, highlighting our focus on diverse leadership and our early successes. It included quotes from Maya Jackson and 2 of our other portfolio company founders, all praising our partnership approach and contrasting it favorably with their experiences seeking traditional venture funding. Most concerning, however, was the direct comparison to Lefort Capital. Chen Strategic's approach stands in stark contrast to established firms like Lefort Capital, where founder Olivia Chen previously served as partner before an abrupt departure earlier this year. While Lefort continues to focus on later-stage companies with traditional leadership profiles, Chen has deliberately targeted the gaps in that model, potentially revealing a significant blind spot in conventional investment strategy. Well, that subtlety train has left the station, Layla remarked after reading the piece. James is definitely going to notice this. If he hadn't already, he certainly will now. I agreed, setting down my coffee. We were meeting in my apartment on a Sunday morning, the journal spread out between us on the kitchen island. The question is, how will he respond? He'll try to discredit you, she said without hesitation. Paint you as inexperienced, emotionally driven. The usual tactics men use against women who challenge them. Let him try. The words came out with more confidence than I felt. Our track record speaks for itself. It's a solid start, but you're still vulnerable, Olivia. Your capital reserves are limited compared to Lefort. If he decides to compete directly for your client base or poach your team members with ridiculous salary offers, he won't, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. That's not James's style. He doesn't defend, he attacks. He'll try to move against our portfolio companies, pressure them to reconsider our investment. Or he'll go after our potential investors, warn them away. Layla studied me, a slight frown creasing her forehead. You still know how he thinks. I spent 3 years of my life with him. The admission didn't hurt as much as it once had. The raw wound of betrayal had gradually transformed into something else, a clear-eyed understanding of exactly who James Lefort was, his strengths, his weaknesses, his predictable patterns, knowledge I would use to my advantage. We need to prepare for whatever he might do, I continued. Shore up relationships with our portfolio companies, accelerate our next funding round, and ... I hesitated, then decided to share what I'd been considering for weeks. We need to approach Victor Harrington. Layla's eyebrows shot up. The Victor Harrington? The tech venture capitalist? The same. He's notoriously selective about his partnerships and completely uninterested in the kind of early-stage, socially conscious investments you're making. That's the public perception. I agreed. But I have reason to believe he's looking to diversify his portfolio, and he has a personal reason to be interested in working with us. Which is, he hates James Lefort. Layla's surprise turned to intrigue. Go on. 3 years ago, James persuaded one of Victor's most promising portfolio companies to break their investment agreement and take funding from Lefort instead. It was legally questionable but technically permissible due to a loophole in the contract. Victor lost millions and, more importantly, lost face in the industry. And you know this how? I was there. I wasn't directly involved in the deal, but I saw how James operated. He was ruthless, calculating. He didn't just want the company, he wanted to humiliate Victor. So your plan is to leverage this ancient grudge to get Harrington's backing? Layla looked skeptical. That seems risky. And a bit manipulative. Not manipulative. Strategic. I met her gaze steadily. I'm not suggesting we trick Victor or use him. I'm suggesting we offer a genuine partnership that happens to align with his personal interests as well as his financial ones, including his interest in payback. If that's part of his motivation, so be it. Mine isn't exactly pure either. Layla was quiet for a long moment, considering. This is where it starts, isn't it? The real plan. Not just building Chen Strategic as a successful alternative to Lefort, but something bigger. Something aimed directly at James. I took a deep breath. It was time to trust Layla with the full scope of what I'd been envisioning. Yes, tell me. I want to build Chen Strategic into something so successful, so undeniable, that we can acquire Lefort Capital. I want to walk into James's office as his boss, not his ex-partner, not his ex-girlfriend, his boss. I expected shock, perhaps even an attempt to talk me out of what might seem like an impossible goal driven by personal vendetta. Instead, Layla simply nodded slowly. I wondered if that might be where this was heading. She picked up her coffee, took a thoughtful sip. It's ambitious. Some might say delusional, given the relative sizes of your operations and resources. It won't happen overnight, I acknowledged. It might take years, but every move we make will be toward that ultimate goal. And when you get there, when you're standing in James's office as his boss, what then? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the path to that moment that I hadn't fully considered what would come after. I'm not sure, I admitted. I just know I need to get there. Well, Layla said, her expression shifting to one of determination. Then we'd better make sure you do. She pulled out her tablet and opened a new document. Let's map out exactly how we're going to approach Victor Harrington. Victor Harrington's office occupied the entire top floor of a sleek building in Hudson Yards, offering panoramic views of the city and the Hudson River beyond. Unlike the traditional wood-paneled opulence of old money finance, his space was minimalist, almost stark. White walls, concrete floors, furniture that prioritized function over comfort. It matched the man himself, known for his directness and lack of pretense despite his billions. When his assistant showed me into his office precisely at our appointed time, Victor was standing at the window, looking out at the city below. He turned as I entered, fixing me with the intense gaze that had reportedly made startup founders either fall in love or run for the exits. "Olivia Chen," he said, his voice matching his appearance, trim, precise, economical. "I've been following your work. No handshake offered, no pleasantries exchanged. Direct to business. I could appreciate that. I'm flattered and somewhat surprised given the relatively small scale of our operations so far. Small but strategic." He gestured for me to sit in one of the minimalist chairs facing his desk. "Your investment in Fortis Security was particularly interesting. Maya Jackson is brilliant, undervalued by most of the market. Not by us," I replied, taking the offered seat. "We recognized her potential immediately, as did I. I was in early discussions with her when she suddenly signed with your firm." There was no accusation in his tone, merely observation. "We offered terms that respected her vision and her leadership. And we moved quickly. Efficient decisiveness, a rare quality." He sat across from me, hands steepled. "So, Miss Chen, your email mentioned a potential partnership opportunity that would be mutually advantageous. I'm curious what you believe would advantage me, given the resources at my disposal." This was the moment. I'd rehearsed this pitch countless times, refining the approach, anticipating objections. But now, facing Victor directly, I decided to abandon the carefully crafted presentation in favor of the brutal honesty I suspected he would respect more. "Access to investment opportunities you're currently missing. A partnership structure that leverages your capital with our specialized market insight. And," I added, meeting his gaze directly, "a chance to correct a particular imbalance in the financial ecosystem that I believe concerns us both." One eyebrow raised slightly, the only visible reaction to my oblique reference to James Lafort. "Elaborate." Chen Strategic has identified and secured relationships with early-stage companies that align with emerging market trends, particularly in diverse leadership, sustainability, and social impact. Areas traditional venture capital has undervalued. "Including your funds, with all due respect?" He nodded, neither confirming nor denying my assessment. "We've built trust with founders who are inherently skeptical of traditional investment structures. They work with us because we approach partnership differently. But our capital reserves are limited, restricting our ability to fully support their growth. So you need my money. I need a capital partner who understands the value proposition. You need access to a deal flow you're currently missing. It's a straightforward exchange of value." "And the imbalance you mentioned?" I paused, considering how direct to be. Victor's reputation suggested he appreciated straight talk, but this was delicate territory. Lafort Capital's current market position is built on certain practices and philosophies that are increasingly out of step with where the market is heading. James Lafort specifically has blind spots that create vulnerability in his portfolio and approach. Blind spots you understand intimately, having worked alongside him. "Yes." Victor leaned back in his chair, studying me with renewed interest. "And your proposed partnership would, in addition to its other merits, position both our firms to capitalize on these vulnerabilities?" "Eventually, yes. Though that's a longer-term strategic outcome, not the primary purpose of our collaboration." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Of course." For the next hour, we discussed specifics: investment criteria, management structure, profit sharing, decision-making protocols. Victor was thorough, incisive, challenging my assumptions and testing my knowledge. It was the most intellectually rigorous conversation I'd had since leaving Lafort. As our meeting concluded, he walked me to the door of his office, finally extending his hand. "I'll have my team draft a preliminary agreement based on our discussion. We can refine terms from there." "So you're interested in the partnership?" I wanted explicit confirmation. "I'm interested in asymmetric opportunities, Mins Chen. Situations where specialized knowledge creates leverage." His handshake was firm, brief. "And I'm particularly interested in partnerships with people who understand that business is never just business. It's always personal too, no matter what anyone claims." As the elevator descended from Victor's office, I felt a surge of exhilaration mixed with vindication. The partnership with Harrington Ventures would transform Chen Strategic's capabilities overnight, giving us access to capital resources that would put us in a completely different weight class. It was a critical step toward my ultimate goal, one I hadn't expected to achieve for at least another year. James had taught me to recognize opportunity and act decisively, another lesson I was using against him. The formal announcement of our partnership with Harrington Ventures came 3 weeks later, after intense negotiation of terms. The structure we established was elegant in its simplicity. Victor would provide $50 million in investment capital to a new fund jointly managed by Chen Strategic and Harrington Ventures. We would identify and vet potential investments, with final decisions requiring mutual agreement. Profits would be shared proportionally, with performance incentives that benefited both firms. The press release went out on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing constantly. Journalists seeking comments, potential clients hoping to catch our interest, other investors exploring possible collaborations. The financial news channels featured discussions about the unexpected partnership and what it signaled about changing investment priorities. I declined all interview requests, letting our press release speak for itself. Victor did the same, maintaining his usual media reticence. Our silence only fueled more speculation and interest. What I was really waiting for, though I didn't admit it to anyone but Layla, was James's reaction. It came Wednesday morning, in the form of a text message from a number I still knew by heart, despite having deleted it from my contacts. Unknown. Congratulations on the Harrington deal. Interesting choice of partner. Didn't take you long to find a new mentor. The implication was clear and typically dismissive. In James's view, I couldn't possibly have engineered this partnership on my own. I must be riding on Victor's coattails, just as he believed I'd ridden on his. I didn't bother responding. Actions would speak louder than any words I could offer. The partnership with Victor accelerated Chen Strategic's growth exponentially. Within 6 months, we had doubled our portfolio, expanded our team to 27 people, and moved to a full-floor office in a premier building in Chelsea. Our investment focus remained consistent: early to mid-stage companies with diverse leadership and innovative approaches to established industries, but our reach extended significantly. We began to attract attention not just from financial media, but from mainstream business publications. Forbes included me in their 40 Under 40 list. Bloomberg ran a feature on our investment approach. Harvard Business Review published a case study on our partnership model with portfolio companies. Throughout this period of rapid growth, I maintained a punishing schedule. 18-hour days were standard. I lived on coffee, protein bars, and occasional proper meals when Layla insisted. My apartment became little more than a place to shower and change clothes. My entire existence narrowed to a single focus: building Chen Strategic into an undeniable force. The physical and emotional toll was significant. I lost weight, developed insomnia, fought periodic anxiety attacks that I hid from everyone, even Layla. But I also experienced a clarity of purpose unlike anything I'd known before. Each victory, each milestone, each new company added to our portfolio felt like a step toward vindication. Damaged goods. The phrase still echoed in my mind during quiet moments, but now it fueled me rather than wounded me. James had been wrong about me, wrong about what I could build, wrong about my value, and I would make sure he knew it. On the first anniversary of Chen Strategic's founding, we held a small celebration at our offices. Just our team, the founders of our portfolio companies, and a few close partners including Victor Harrington. I gave a brief speech thanking everyone for their contributions, then raised a toast to our continued success. As glasses clinked and conversations resumed, Victor appeared at my side. "Impressive achievement," he said, surveying the room filled with brilliant, motivated people who had chosen to join my vision. 1 year from concept to managing over $60 million in investments. We've been fortunate to find the right opportunities. Fortune favors the prepared, he countered, and the determined. He sipped his champagne, then added casually, "I had dinner with Charles Geller last week." The non sequitur caught me off guard. "Oh?" He mentioned that Lefort isn't performing as expected since the acquisition. Apparently, James has been distracted, making uncharacteristic mistakes. I kept my expression neutral despite the surge of satisfaction his words provoked. The transition from founder to employee can be challenging. Indeed. Victor's gaze was shrewd, particularly when one's former partner is making headlines for innovative investment strategies. Before I could respond, Maya Jackson approached, eager to discuss Fortis Securities' latest breakthroughs. Victor moved away, but his words lingered in my mind throughout the evening. James was struggling, making mistakes. distracted, possibly by my success. It was a small victory, but significant, evidence that my path to reclaiming power was not just a fantasy, but a viable strategy already bearing fruit. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I allowed myself a moment of pure, unfiltered triumph. I poured a glass of expensive scotch, not James's brand, but one I'd discovered I preferred, and raised it in a solitary toast to the woman staring back at me from the mirror. A woman who had transformed pain into purpose, humiliation into determination, rejection into rebirth, damaged goods, number, self-made success. And this was just the beginning. 18 months after founding Chen Strategic, I received an unexpected invitation. The New York Finance Guild, an exclusive organization of the city's top financial leaders, requested my presence at their annual gala. Membership in the Guild was by invitation only, typically extended to individuals with decades in the industry and billions under management. The invitation cited my innovative approach to venture capital and rapidly growing influence in the market. I recognized it for what it was, acknowledgement from the old guard that Chen Strategic had become impossible to ignore. When I mentioned the invitation to Victor during our weekly strategy meeting, his reaction surprised me. "Decline," he said flatly. "It's a waste of time." "It's recognition from the establishment," I countered. "Access to a network that could be valuable. It's an attempt to co-opt you, to make you one of them so they can control you." His expression was unusually severe. "The moment you step into that ballroom in an evening gown, sipping champagne with the dinosaurs who've been running finance for decades, you become less dangerous to them, less disruptive. Or I gain insider access that furthers our goals." Victor shook his head. "There are other ways to gain access without compromising your position. Trust me on this, Olivia. I've watched them absorb potential threats this way for years." I considered his advice seriously. Victor rarely offered such direct guidance, preferring to let me chart our course while providing occasional course corrections. His strong opinion on this matter carried weight. "James will be there," I said finally, revealing what was perhaps my true motivation. "As a guild member." Understanding dawned in Victor's eyes. "Ah, and you want him to see you welcomed into the club he thought you'd never enter?" "Something like that." "Personal satisfaction versus strategic advantage," Victor sighed. "If you go with clear eyes. Understand what you're walking into and why. Don't let emotion dictate strategy." I never do. The statement wasn't entirely true, and we both knew it. My entire venture had emotional roots, even if I'd built it with strategic precision. The night of the gala, I deliberated extensively over my appearance. The dress I finally selected was deep emerald green, elegant but commanding, more boardroom power than ballroom glamour. My hair, makeup, and jewelry were similarly chosen for impact rather than conventional beauty. I wasn't attending as someone seeking approval, but as a force demanding recognition. The event was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Temple of Dender providing a dramatic backdrop for New York's financial elite. As I entered, I felt the weight of eyes assessing, measuring, judging. I recognized many faces from financial news and industry events, men and a few women who collectively controlled trillions in assets. Power made manifest in designer formal wear and complex social hierarchies. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and began to circulate, engaging in the careful dance of high-level networking. Most conversations followed a predictable pattern: congratulations on Chen Strategic's success, probing questions about our strategy, subtle attempts to determine whether I was a genuine innovator or simply the beneficiary of Victor Harrington's backing. I answered with practiced poise, neither defensive nor boastful, maintaining the delicate balance between confidence and humility that these circles demanded, all while scanning the room for the one face I both dreaded and anticipated seeing. I was deep in conversation with the female CEO of a major investment bank when I felt it, a prickling awareness that made the fine hairs on my neck stand up. I didn't need to turn to know James had arrived. "Excuse me," I said to the CEO, "I see someone I should greet." I turned deliberately, my eyes finding him instantly across the crowded room. He was standing with a small group of men, laughing at something one had said. He looked exactly as I remembered, impeccably tailored in a custom tuxedo, dark hair perfectly styled, his posture radiating the casual confidence that had once captivated me. As if sensing my gaze, he glanced up. Our eyes locked across the space between us. For an instant, something flashed across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or some other emotion I couldn't identify from this distance. Then his expression settled into a polite mask as he excused himself from his group and began walking toward me. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression composed, my posture relaxed. This moment had featured in both my dreams and nightmares for months. I would not show weakness now. Olivia. His voice was exactly as I remembered, smooth and controlled. I wondered if you'd be here. James. I was proud of how steady my own voice sounded. Congratulations on the Geller acquisition. I understand the integration is progressing. A flicker of annoyance crossed his features at my deliberate emphasis, suggesting I knew about the challenges he was facing. All acquisitions have their adjustment periods. But yes, it's proceeding according to plan. Good to hear. I sipped my champagne, using the moment to gather myself. Up close, the impact of his presence was more disorienting than I'd anticipated. Not because of lingering attraction that had burned away in the fire of betrayal, but because of the sheer weight of our shared history. Your own venture seems to be gaining traction, he offered, his tone suggesting mild interest rather than the keen awareness I suspected he actually felt. The Harrington partnership was quite a coup. Victor and I discovered we have compatible investment philosophies. Among other things, I imagine. The implication was clear, and typically James. He couldn't conceive of a woman succeeding on merit alone. There must be a personal angle, a relationship, a manipulation. Our partnership is strictly professional, I replied, my tone cooling. Though I understand why you might have difficulty recognizing such arrangements. His smile tightened. Still bitter, Olivia? I would have thought you'd moved beyond that by now. Not bitter, just clear-eyed about who you are and how you operate. I met his gaze directly, which has proven quite valuable in building my business. A subtle shift in his expression told me the barb had landed. Before he could respond, we were interrupted by Charles Geller, approaching with a warm smile. Olivia Chen, the woman everyone's talking about. He extended his hand, pointedly turning his back slightly to James. So pleased you could join us tonight, Mr. Geller. It's good to see you again. I shook his hand, aware of James watching this exchange with poorly concealed irritation. Charles, please. And I've been following your progress with great interest. Your approach to Fortis Security was particularly impressive. Exactly the kind of innovative thinking we value. Thank you. I smiled, feeling James's growing discomfort as a tangible force. That means a great deal coming from you. Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere less crowded, Charles suggested. There are several people I'd like to introduce you to. I'd be delighted. As Charles led me away, I glanced back once to find James watching us, his expression unreadable. The validation of being openly valued by Charles Geller in front of James was sweeter than I'd imagined it would be. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of introductions, conversations, and subtle power plays. Charles proved to be an unexpectedly strong advocate, introducing me to key figures in finance with glowing endorsements of Chen Strategic's approach. I understood he was likely using me to needle James, but our mutual utility didn't diminish the value of the connections being formed. By the time I left, well after midnight, I had collected a dozen business cards from people who could materially advance our goals, including 2 potential investors interested in participating in our next fund. Victor had been partially right. The gala was indeed an attempt by the establishment to assess and potentially neutralize me as a disruptive force. But he'd underestimated my ability to navigate these waters while maintaining my independence. As my car pulled away from the museum, my phone chimed with an incoming text. I expected Layla, who had requested an immediate report on the evening's events. Instead, it was James. Unknown. Congratulations on your warm welcome tonight. Impressive performance. But we both know what you're really after, don't we? Careful playing with the big leagues, Olivia. The stakes get much higher. I stared at the message, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within me. Anger at his condescension. Satisfaction that he clearly felt threatened enough to reach out. And a cold determination that only hardened with his attempt at intimidation. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that my actions wouldn't express more eloquently in time. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting of our core team. The connections I'd made at the gala had crystallized an idea that had been forming for weeks, an acceleration of our growth strategy that would significantly advance our ultimate goal. We're launching a second fund, I announced once everyone was assembled in our conference room, focused specifically on established companies seeking strategic repositioning in evolving markets. Emily Chen, our lead analyst, looked up from her tablet with surprise. That's a significant departure from our current focus on early and mid-stage growth companies. A complementary approach, not a replacement, I clarified. Our existing fund will continue with its current strategy. This will be an entirely new vehicle with different investment criteria and a separate management structure. Targeting more mature companies puts us in direct competition with firms like Lefort, Marcus pointed out, including for talent and deal flow. Are we ready for that? We're more than ready, I replied with confidence I genuinely felt. Last night, I secured preliminary commitments from 2 institutional investors who are eager to diversify their portfolios with our approach. Layla, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. This accelerates our timeline considerably. Yes, I met her gaze, knowing she understood the fuller implications. Market conditions are favorable. Our reputation is strong, and certain competitors are showing vulnerability that creates a unique window of opportunity. Over the next hour, we outlined the structure of this new fund, Chen Strategic Transformation Fund, with an initial target of $200 million in capital commitments, more than triple the size of our original fund. A bold step that would position us firmly in the mid-tier of investment firms, no longer a niche player but a recognized force. After the meeting adjourned and the team dispersed to begin implementation, Layla remained behind, closing the conference room door. Your encounter with James at the gala sparked this, didn't it? She asked directly. It crystallized what I was already considering, I acknowledged. Seeing him, talking to him, it confirmed he's vulnerable right now. The Geller integration isn't going smoothly. He's distracted, making mistakes. It's time to press our advantage. And the end game? She asked quietly. Is it still what you described a year ago? Yes. My resolution had only strengthened, but I think it can happen sooner than I initially projected. With the right strategic moves. Layla studied me, her expression a mixture of concern and admiration. You've changed, Olivia. In ways I'm still trying to understand. I've become what I needed to be. That's what worries me. When this is over, when you've achieved your goal, will you recognize yourself? The question struck deeper than I wanted to admit. I had changed. The woman I'd been before James's betrayal, trusting, eager to please, seeking validation, was gone. In her place was someone harder, more calculating, more ruthless in pursuit of her objectives. I'll recognize what matters, I said finally. The rest is just adaptation to circumstances. Layla didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. I'll start drafting the legal structure for the new fund. And Olivia? Be careful. Desperation makes people dangerous. If James feels truly threatened, let him, I replied, a cold certainty settling in my chest. I'm not the vulnerable one anymore. The launch of the Chen Strategic Transformation Fund sent ripples through the financial community. Within 3 weeks, we had secured commitments for $180 million of our $200 million target, with strong indications the fund would be oversubscribed. Victor Harrington contributed $50 million personally, a vote of confidence that attracted other investors. Our first acquisition through the new fund was Meridian Technologies, a once promising software company that had stalled under outdated leadership and failure to adapt to cloud-based solutions. We purchased a controlling interest, installed new management with a mandate for aggressive modernization, and began the transformation process. It was during this period that I first noticed the pattern of more direct interference from Lefort Capital. No longer content with subtle countermoves, James began to actively target our portfolio companies and key employees. One morning, I arrived at the office to find Marcus waiting with disturbing news. Lefort just made an offer to buy Fortis Security, triple the valuation we established in our last funding round. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. Have you spoken with Maya? She called me directly, said she wanted us to know immediately. He hesitated. She also said James personally made the pitch, emphasizing Lefort's superior resources and connections compared to our limited experience. The direct attack was both infuriating and validating. James wouldn't bother with such tactics if he didn't see us as a genuine threat. Maya's response? She hasn't given one yet. Wanted to discuss with us first. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Olivia, that kind of valuation is impossible for us to match. If she's making a purely financial decision, it's not just financial, I said with more confidence than I felt. Set up a call with Maya for this afternoon. And in the meantime, prepare a counter-proposal. Not matching Lefort's valuation, we can't, but addressing Fortis's actual needs. growth support, strategic partnerships, accelerated development resources. The call with Maya revealed what I'd suspected. James's offer came with significant strings attached. A complete management restructuring that would reduce her role to technical advisor, relocation of headquarters from Atlanta to New York, integration of Fortis's proprietary technology into Lefort's existing security investments. "He's not buying your company," I told her bluntly. "He's dismantling it for parts while neutralizing you as a founder. And he's overpaying because his real target isn't Fortis, it's Chen Strategic." Maya was silent for a moment, absorbing this perspective. "You're saying this is about you and James Lefort, not about my company's value?" "It's about both," I acknowledged. "Your company is genuinely valuable, which is why we invested. But the timing and nature of Lefort's offer suggest additional motivations. So I'm collateral damage in some personal war between you two?" Her voice had cooled significantly. "No." I kept my tone firm, controlled. "You're a brilliant founder who built a revolutionary security platform. That's why we invested, and that's why we want to continue supporting your vision, not dismantling it for parts like Lefort plans to do." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, Maya probing our counterproposal with the same incisive intelligence that had made Fortis successful. By the end, she hadn't committed either way, but promised to consider all factors before making her decision. After the call ended, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. James was escalating. The question was how far he would go and how directly I should respond. The answer came the next morning in the form of an email from Richard Zhang, one of our lead investors in the new transformation fund. He was withdrawing his $30 million commitment with immediate effect, citing strategic reconsideration of allocation priorities. No further explanation offered. 3 hours later, a second investor pulled out, then a third. By the end of the day, we had lost commitments totaling $85 million, nearly half our funding target. I called an emergency meeting with Victor, Layla, and our core team. "Lefort is pressuring our investors," I stated without preamble. "We need to understand how, and we need to counter immediately." Victor's expression was grim. "I've already made some calls. James is leveraging relationships with bank presidents, wealth managers, family offices, anyone who might influence our investors, suggesting that backing Chen Strategic could damage their access to other opportunities, essentially threatening to blackball anyone who works with us," Layla translated. "Can he do that?" "Not officially," Victor replied. "But finance runs on relationships and reputation. Whispered concerns in the right ears can be devastatingly effective." I felt a cold rage building inside me but forced it down. Emotion wouldn't help us navigate this crisis. "Options?" I asked, looking around the table. "We could go public," Emily suggested. "Expose Lefort's tactics to the financial press. Create a scandal that would make it harder for him to operate in the shadows." "Too risky," Marcus countered. "Without hard evidence, we'd look desperate, and it could scare off our remaining investors." "We need to replace the lost commitments," I said. "Quickly, from sources beyond James's influence. International investors," Victor suggested. "Asian family offices, European pension funds, entities with no direct exposure to Lefort's pressure tactics." "That takes time we don't have," Layla pointed out. "The fund launch is scheduled for next month. Delays will be perceived as weakness." A heavy silence fell over the room as the magnitude of our predicament sank in. James had identified our most vulnerable point and struck with precision. If the transformation fund failed to launch or launched significantly undersubscribed, our momentum would stall. Worse, it would validate the whispers he was surely spreading about Chen Strategic being out of its depth. "I'll cover the difference," Victor said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "Temporarily. I'll increase my commitment to $135 million to replace the withdrawn funds, with the understanding that we'll bring in new investors over the next 6 months to reduce my position to the originally agreed percentage." The offer was unexpected and extraordinarily generous. It would solve our immediate problem while giving us time to recruit replacement investors beyond James's reach. "Victor, that's..." I began, not quite sure how to respond. "Strategic," he finished for me. "Nothing more. I'm protecting my investment and countering a competitor's underhanded tactics. Don't make it personal." But it was personal, for both of us. His hatred of James and his belief in what I was building had aligned to create this moment of intervention. "Accepted," I said simply, with appreciation for the strategic support. The rest of the meeting focused on implementation details and contingency planning. As everyone filed out, Victor remained behind, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "He's declared open war now," he observed quietly. "This will escalate." "I know. Are you prepared for that? Truly prepared?" "Because James Lafort has resources and connections we don't, and he's fighting for his professional life. He knows what you're ultimately aiming for." I met his gaze steadily. "I've been preparing for this since the day he called me damaged goods. Everything I've built has been with this confrontation in mind." Victor nodded slowly. "Just remember, in war, the original objective sometimes gets lost in the battle itself. Don't become so focused on defeating James that you forget why you started Chen Strategic in the first place." His words stayed with me long after he left, echoing Layla's earlier concerns. Was I losing myself in pursuit of vengeance? Had proving James wrong become more important than building something truly valuable? I pushed the doubts aside. There would be time for reflection later. Now, I needed to focus on countering James's attacks and keeping our momentum going. The transformation fund would launch on schedule, and it would succeed. I would make sure of it. The next 6 months were the most challenging of my professional life. James's campaign against Chen Strategic intensified, becoming both more aggressive and more creative. Beyond pressuring our investors, he began targeting our portfolio companies, our banking relationships, even our office lease. Nothing was off limits. We countered each move as best we could, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. We lost 2 portfolio companies to Lafort's aggressive buyout offers. 3 key team members were poached with compensation packages we couldn't hope to match. Our banking terms were suddenly reviewed and made less favorable. But we also scored victories. Maya Jackson ultimately rejected Lafort's offer for Fortis Security, publicly reaffirming her commitment to our partnership. Our transformation fund launched successfully with Victor's backing and quickly demonstrated strong returns through the Meridian Technologies turnaround. We recruited 2 senior analysts from Goldman Sachs who brought valuable expertise and connections. Throughout this period, I maintained a punishing schedule and a public face of unwavering confidence. Inside, however, the strain was taking its toll. I lost more weight. My insomnia worsened. I developed migraines that sometimes left me incapacitated for hours. Layla finally confronted me after finding me in my office at 3 a.m., working despite a migraine so severe I could barely see straight. "This has to stop," she said, taking the tablet from my hands. "You're killing yourself, Olivia." "I'm fine," I protested weakly. "Just a headache." "Just a headache? You can barely stand. When was the last time you ate a proper meal? Or slept more than 4 hours?" I couldn't remember, which was answer enough. "James Lafort is not worth this," she continued, her voice gentler now. "No revenge is worth destroying yourself." "It's not just about revenge anymore," I said, the admission surprising even me. "It's about proving I can build something better, something that lasts, something that matters." Layla sat on the edge of my desk, studying me with concern. "And you are?" "Chen Strategic is already successful by any objective measure. We have a strong portfolio, growing assets under management, a respected position in the industry." "You've proven your point." "Not yet." The intensity of my response surprised us both. "Not until I've completely succeeded where he said I would fail." "And when will that be? When you've acquired Lafort Capital? When James is working for you? When? What's the endpoint where you finally feel vindicated and can stop driving yourself into the ground?" I had no answer. The endpoint had always been hazy in my mind, some future moment of triumph that kept shifting further away the closer I got to it. "Take a week off," Layla urged. "Completely off. Go somewhere without your phone, without your laptop. Clear your head and remember who you are beyond this crusade." "I can't," I protested. "Not with everything that's happening? You can. The team is strong. Victor and I can handle anything urgent." Her expression softened. "Please, Olivia. As your friend, I'm asking you to step back before you break." Something in her voice, genuine fear for my well-being, finally penetrated my exhaustion. I nodded slowly. "A few days, not a week. Just to reset." "I'll take it." She helped me to my feet. "I'm calling you a car. Go home, pack a bag, and get out of the city. The Hudson Valley, the Hamptons, anywhere. Just go." The next morning, I found myself on a train to a small town in the Hudson Valley, where I'd booked a cottage through a luxury rental service. No meetings, no calls, no emails. Just quiet, solitude, and the chance to remember who I was beyond the all-consuming mission I'd assigned myself. The first day was excruciating. My body, finally given permission to rest, collapsed into nearly 20 hours of dreamless sleep. When I finally woke, disoriented and ravenous, it was early morning of the second day. I forced myself to establish a simple routine. Morning walks along the river. Actual meals eaten sitting down, not standing over my desk. Afternoons reading books that had nothing to do with finance or business strategy. Evenings watching the sunset from the cottage porch, nursing a single glass of wine. By the third day, the constant tension in my shoulders had begun to ease. The migraines receded. I started to remember what it felt like to exist without the driving pressure of revenge and vindication. On the fourth day, I found myself thinking about the path that had led me here. Not just from James's betrayal, but before that. The ambitious girl from a middle-class family in Philadelphia who had fought her way into Wharton. The young professional determined to prove herself in the male-dominated world of finance. The woman who had fallen in love with a charismatic, brilliant man who seemed to value her mind as much as her heart. What would that girl, that young professional, that woman think of who I had become? Would she recognize herself in the driven, sometimes ruthless leader of Chen Strategic? Would she approve of the single-minded focus on defeating James, often at the expense of my own well-being? I didn't have clear answers. But for the first time in nearly 2 years, I allowed myself to question whether the path I'd chosen was truly leading me where I wanted to go. On the fifth day, I received a text from Layla that shattered my fragile peace. Layla, need you back ASAP. Lafort making move on Meridian Technologies. Emergency board meeting tomorrow at 9. I was on the next train to the city, my mind racing with possibilities and counter-strategies. The brief respite had cleared my thinking enough to recognize this for what it was, a calculated escalation targeting our most significant transformation fund investment. Back in my apartment, I showered and changed quickly, then called Layla for details. James somehow convinced 2 board members that our turnaround strategy is too slow and too cautious, she explained. He's offering to buy out all shareholders at a 20% premium over current valuation. Which board members? Davidson and Wilson. Both former college friends of James, though they disclosed no prior relationship during our due diligence. A classic James tactic, leveraging personal connections hidden behind layers of corporate structure. I should have anticipated this possibility. What's our position? We control 40% of voting shares. The founders hold 25% and have indicated they support our strategy. But the remaining 35% is split among various investors, including Davidson and Wilson, who control 15% between them. So we need to secure at least an additional 11% to maintain control. Exactly. And the board meeting is tomorrow morning. James has been working this angle for weeks while we thought everything was proceeding smoothly. I felt a familiar cold anger building, but now it was tempered with something else. Clarity. This wasn't just about James trying to undermine Chen Strategic anymore. This was about him using unethical tactics to damage a company's legitimate turnaround efforts for his personal vendetta. Meridian's employees, customers, and other shareholders would all suffer if Lafort gained control and implemented the asset-stripping approach he typically favored. We'll secure the additional votes, I said with determination. Start contacting the other shareholders. I'll prepare our counter-presentation for the board. The night passed in a blur of calls, strategy sessions, and preparation. By morning, we had secured tentative support from shareholders representing an additional 9%, still 2% short of what we needed to definitively block James's move. The board meeting was held in Meridian's headquarters in a gleaming midtown tower. I arrived early, wanting time to connect with key board members before the formal proceedings began. What I hadn't expected was to find James already there, engaged in intense conversation with several board members in a corner of the conference room. He looked up as I entered, a flash of something, surprise? Concern? Crossing his face before his expression settled into a mask of professional cordiality. Olivia, didn't expect to see you here personally. I make a point of being present for important discussions about our portfolio companies, I replied evenly. Especially when outside parties attempt hostile actions against our investment. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly recognizing the tension between us. Hardly hostile, James countered smoothly. Simply an alternative proposal that offers immediate value to all shareholders. Something your current strategy cannot guarantee. Before I could respond, the board chairman called the meeting to order. The next 3 hours were a methodical battle for Meridian's future. James presented Lefort's offer with his characteristic polish and precision, emphasizing immediate returns, glossing over the likely dismantling of the company's core operations, hinting at undisclosed synergies that would supposedly benefit everyone. When my turn came, I took a different approach. Rather than directly attacking James's proposal, I focused on Meridian's progress under our management, the technical achievements, the improved client retention, the promising new product development. I brought forward the company's CTO and lead product manager to share specific metrics and roadmap details that had never been publicly disclosed. Most critically, I revealed our previously confidential negotiations with a major technology partner, discussions that would potentially triple Meridian's market reach if successful. The choice before this board is clear, I concluded. A quick sale that primarily benefits Lefort Capital, or continued execution of a turnaround strategy that is already showing demonstrable results. Short-term profit for some, or long-term value creation for all stakeholders, including the 400 employees whose livelihoods depend on Meridian's continued operation. As the board deliberated, James approached me in the hallway outside the conference room. "Impressive performance," he said, his tone suggesting grudging respect. "Especially the partnership reveal. Was that real or a tactical fabrication?" "Unlike some, I don't fabricate evidence to win board votes," I replied coolly. "Every statement I made is documented and verifiable." He studied me, his expression unreadable. "This has gone beyond business, hasn't it? Between us. You took it beyond business the moment you called me damaged goods while pushing me out of my own company." A flicker of something, regret? Discomfort? Crossed his face. "That was unfortunate phrasing, but accurate to how you saw me, how you still see me. Is that what this is all about? Proving me wrong about that assessment?" Before I could respond, the board secretary appeared to call us back into the meeting room for the vote. James and I exchanged one last look, a moment of silent acknowledgement that whatever happened next, our conflict had reached a point of no return. The vote went in our favor, though barely. 8-7 against Lefort's offer, with the chairman casting the deciding vote after expressing concerns about the impact on Meridian's employees and long-term viability. James accepted the defeat with outward grace, congratulating the board on their careful consideration, before making a swift exit. As the meeting concluded and board members dispersed, the chairman approached me privately. "That was closer than it should have been," he said quietly. "Lefort is persuasive and he had prepared his ground well. Thank you for your support," I replied, genuinely grateful. His vote had been the decisive one. "I didn't do it for you or for Chen Strategic," he clarified. "I did it because I've seen what happens to companies after Lefort acquires them. Asset stripping, mass layoffs, hollowed-out operations repackaged and sold to the highest bidder. I couldn't let that happen to Meridian." His words stayed with me long after the meeting ended. This man had no personal loyalty to me, no stake in my conflict with James. He had simply recognized a predatory business practice and refused to enable it. It made me wonder how many others saw James this way, not as the brilliant, charismatic investment leader he projected, but as a corporate predator who destroyed value even as he claimed to create it. More importantly, it made me question what others saw when they looked at me now. Was I becoming recognizable as something different from James? Or was I merely creating a mirror image of his approach, driven by different motivations but equally destructive? Back at Chen Strategic's offices, we celebrated the Meridian victory with our team. But after everyone dispersed, I remained alone in my office, turning these questions over in my mind. The brief respite in the Hudson Valley had created just enough distance for me to see my path with clearer eyes, both how far I'd come and what might lie ahead if I continued unaltered. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Unknown number, but I had a strong suspicion who it might be. "Chen," I answered neutrally. "That was well played today." James's voice, slightly roughened by what sounded like his second scotch of the evening. "The partnership reveal especially. I underestimated your preparation." "You underestimated me generally. It's becoming a pattern." A short laugh, not entirely humorous. "Perhaps. Though I'd argue I've been taking you very seriously for some time now." A pause. "Why Meridian, Olivia? Of all the companies you could target for your fund, why one so directly aligned with Lefort's interests?" "We didn't choose Meridian to antagonize you," I replied truthfully. "We chose it because it's an undervalued company with strong fundamentals and poor leadership. Classic turnaround opportunity. And the fact that I had been exploring acquisition options for 3 months before you appeared had nothing to do with your decision. I hesitated. The truth was more complex than either of us was acknowledging. I knew you were interested. I didn't know the extent of your preparations? Another laugh, this one with a bitter edge. At least we're being somewhat honest now. The sound of ice clinking in a glass. This can't continue, you know. This ... Whatever it is between us, it's becoming destructive for both sides. Agreed. I was surprised by his apparent desire for détente, but suspicious of his motives. What are you suggesting? A meeting. Just you and me. No lawyers, no teams. To discuss a potential arrangement that might serve both our interests. Warning bells sounded in my mind. What kind of arrangement? One that acknowledges reality. Chen Strategic has established itself as a serious player. LaForte Capital remains a dominant force. Perhaps there's a structure where we can coexist without this constant zero-sum conflict. I considered his offer carefully. It could be genuine. James was nothing if not pragmatic when it served his interests. Or it could be a trap, an attempt to neutralize me through negotiation when direct competition had proven costlier than expected. I'll consider it, I said finally. Send me a proposed time and place. Neutral ground? Of course. He sounded relieved, which only increased my suspicion. I'll have my assistant contact yours tomorrow. After ending the call, I immediately phoned Layla and Victor, conferencing them in to discuss this unexpected development. It's a trap, Victor said flatly when I'd relayed the conversation. James doesn't compromise unless he's planning something bigger. I'm inclined to agree, Layla added. The timing is suspicious, coming right after his defeat at Meridian. But what if it's not? I countered, playing devil's advocate against my own instincts. What if he genuinely recognizes that this conflict is damaging both firms? Wouldn't exploring a potential resolution be the responsible choice? Responsible for whom? Victor challenged. Your investors? Your portfolio companies? Or just easier for you personally? The question stung because it hit at my own uncertainty. Was I considering James's offer because it was strategically sound, or because I was tired of the unrelenting battle? Had my week away from the conflict made me soft, vulnerable to exactly this kind of approach? I'll meet with him, I decided finally, but with extensive preparation and clear boundaries. No commitments, no agreements, just exploration of what he's actually proposing. Neither Victor nor Layla seemed entirely convinced, but they accepted my decision with reluctant support and immediately began helping me plan for every contingency. 2 days later, I arrived at the Pierre Hotel for afternoon tea, the neutral location James had suggested for our meeting. A private table in the corner of the elegant tea room offered both the discretion we needed and the public setting that prevented any truly confidential discussions. James was already seated when I arrived, rising briefly in a gesture of old-world courtesy that felt oddly performative given our history. He looked tired, I noticed, subtle shadows under his eyes, a slight tension in his posture that hadn't been there at the Meridian board meeting. "Thank you for coming," he said as I took my seat across from him. "I wasn't certain you would. Curiosity is a powerful motivator," I replied, keeping my tone light but watchful. Though I admit I'm skeptical about what arrangement you could possibly propose that would satisfy both our objectives. He smiled slightly, acknowledging the fundamental conflict between us. Direct as always. I've always appreciated that about you. The waiter approached and we both ordered English breakfast for him, jasmine pearl for me. A small detail that reminded me how well we had once known each other's preferences. I'll be equally direct, James continued once we were alone again. The current situation between LaForte Capital and Chen Strategic is becoming untenable. We're both expending significant resources on what amounts to mutual sabotage rather than productive investment. An interesting characterization, considering you initiated the hostilities. Did I? He raised an eyebrow. I would argue your entire business was created as an antagonistic response to LaForte, but assigning blame isn't productive. The reality is this conflict is damaging both firms. LaForte more than Chen Strategic, from what I hear, I couldn't resist pointing out. Your integration with Geller Group hasn't gone as smoothly as projected. Clients leaving, key team members departing, investment performance below benchmarks. A flash of irritation crossed his face before he controlled it. All transitions have their challenges. The point remains, this vendetta benefits neither of us in the long term. So what are you proposing? Our tea arrived, giving him a moment to compose his response. I watched as he prepared his cup with the precise routine I remembered. Splash of milk, half teaspoon of sugar, 10 seconds to steep. A strategic alliance, he said finally. Formal recognition of separate operational spheres with clearly defined boundaries. Lefort focuses on late-stage growth and established market sectors. Chen Strategic maintains its focus on early-stage, diverse leadership, social impact investments. We agree not to poach each other's clients, employees, or target companies. I sipped my tea, considering his proposal. On the surface, it seemed reasonable, a professional detente that would allow both firms to operate without constant interference. But the terms heavily favored Lefort, confining Chen Strategic to a niche while giving James free rein in the more lucrative segments of the market. And Transformation Fund? I asked. Our expansion into established company turnarounds? His expression tightened slightly. That's where compromise would be required. Perhaps a joint venture structure for certain qualifying opportunities. Shared risk, shared reward, and shared control, which meant effectively neutralizing our independent action in that space. The real purpose of his proposal was becoming clear. This isn't an alliance, I observed. It's a containment strategy. You're trying to define boundaries that limit our growth while preserving Lefort's dominance. I'm trying to find a sustainable equilibrium, he countered. One that acknowledges your achievements while respecting established market positions. Respecting your established market position, you mean? He sighed, setting down his cup with careful precision. What is your alternative vision, Olivia? Perpetual conflict until one of us destroys the other. Is that really what you want? The question hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. What did I want? The original goal, to build Chen Strategic until it was powerful enough to acquire Lefort Capital, still burned within me. But was that objective worth the toll it was taking? On our portfolio companies caught in the crossfire, on my team working under constant pressure, on my own well-being? What I want, I said slowly, is recognition of Chen Strategic as an equal player with equal right to compete in any market segment we choose. Not confined to categories you deem acceptable. Not controlled through artificial joint venture structures that give you veto power over our moves. That's not an alliance. That's a demand for unconditional surrender of market advantage. No. It's a request for genuine respect rather than strategic containment disguised as compromise. We stared at each other across the table, the fundamental impasse between us laid bare. James wanted to neutralize me as a threat while appearing magnanimous. I wanted vindication and freedom without constraint. I think we've clarified our positions, he said finally, though not in a way that suggests immediate resolution. No, I agreed. But clarity has value of its own. As we concluded our meeting with strained politeness, I realized something had shifted within me. The burning need to defeat James, to crush him completely as he had tried to crush me, had modulated into something more nuanced. I still wanted to win, to prove my value beyond any doubt. But the form that victory might take was evolving in my mind. Perhaps complete destruction wasn't the only path to vindication. Perhaps there was another way to achieve what I truly wanted, recognition of my worth, undeniable proof that his judgment had been catastrophically wrong. Back at Chen Strategic's offices, I called Victor and Layla to my private conference room to debrief. He offered exactly what we expected, I explained. A truce that would effectively contain us within parameters he defines and controls. And you declined, Victor stated rather than asked. Of course. But the meeting clarified something important. I paused, organizing my thoughts. James is genuinely concerned about our growth. The Transformation Fund specifically represents a direct threat to Lefort's core business model. He's trying to neutralize us because he sees us as a legitimate danger. That's been obvious for months, Layla pointed out. His actions have clearly shown he considers us a threat. Yes, but what's changed is my understanding of what that means for our strategy going forward. I stood, moving to the whiteboard that covered one wall of the conference room. We've been thinking about this conflict too personally, as my vendetta against James. That's limited our strategic vision. I began writing on the board, mapping out a new approach. What if we stop focusing on James entirely and instead concentrate on identifying Lefort Capital's structural vulnerabilities? Areas where their business model is fundamentally flawed or out of step with evolving market conditions? Victor leaned forward, intrigued. You're suggesting we attack the firm rather than the man. Exactly. Lefort Capital has weaknesses that exist independently of James's leadership. Their over-reliance on traditional corporate hierarchies, their dismissal of diverse leadership, their extractive approach to acquisitions that destroys long-term value. These aren't just philosophical differences, Layla realized, catching my vision. They're actual market vulnerabilities we can exploit. Yes, the clarity I felt was exhilarating. We don't need to defeat James personally. We need to build a superior model that renders Lefort's approach obsolete. Success is the best revenge. For the next 2 hours, we mapped out a revised strategic direction, not abandoning our ultimate goal of acquiring Lefort Capital, but approaching it through a more sophisticated, less personal path. We would identify key market segments where Lefort was vulnerable due to outdated thinking, build demonstrably superior alternatives, create a model so compelling that clients, investors, and talent would naturally flow from them to us. It wasn't about James anymore. It was about proving, through measurable market success, that the approach he had dismissed as damaged goods was in fact the future of investment strategy. As Victor and Layla left to begin implementation planning, I remained alone in the conference room, staring at the whiteboard filled with our new strategic framework. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I felt completely clear about my path forward. Not driven primarily by pain or rage or the need for vindication, but by the certainty that I was building something genuinely better. Damaged goods. The phrase had lost its power to wound me. Now it simply marked the starting point of a journey that was approaching a different destination than I had initially imagined. The transformation in Chen Strategic's approach was subtle but profound. We became more selective in our investments, focusing on companies and sectors that directly highlighted the contrasts between our philosophy and Lefort's. We developed more sophisticated metrics to demonstrate the value creation our approach generated compared to traditional extraction models. We began publishing white papers and case studies documenting our successes, contributing to a growing industry conversation about evolving investment methodologies. Most importantly, we stopped reacting to James's provocations. When Lefort made competitive moves against us, we evaluated them purely on business merits, responding strategically rather than emotionally. Often, we simply ignored them, focusing instead on our own forward progress. The shift did not go unnoticed. Financial media began describing Chen Strategic as revolutionary rather than merely disruptive. Potential investors approached us rather than requiring aggressive courting. Top talent from prestigious firms began sending unsolicited resumes. 18 months after our team meeting at the Pierre, Chen Strategic had grown to manage over $1.2 billion across 3 distinct funds. Our team had expanded to 78 people occupying 2 full floors of our building. Our portfolio companies were thriving, with Fortis Security preparing for an IPO that would return approximately 800% on our initial investment. Meanwhile, Lefort Capital continued to struggle with integration issues following the Geller acquisition. Several key clients had departed, citing dissatisfaction with post-merger service levels. 3 senior partners had left to start their own firm, and rumors circulated that Charles Geller was increasingly dissatisfied with James's leadership. It was in this context that Victor came to me with unexpected news. Geller Group is considering selling Lefort Capital, he announced without preamble, closing my office door behind him. The integration has been deemed a failure. They want to divest and cut their losses. My heart raced at this information, though I kept my expression measured. Source? Charles Geller himself. We had dinner last night. He wanted my perspective on potential buyers. And did you give him one? Victor's smile was thin but satisfied. I suggested that the most logical buyer would be the firm that best understands Lefort's business model and client relationships. The firm best positioned to retain value during transition and address the integration failures. Chen Strategic. Precisely. I sat back in my chair, absorbing the magnitude of this development. The goal I had been working toward for nearly 4 years was suddenly, unexpectedly within reach. Not through hostile takeover or leveraged buyout, but through Lefort's own failure to sustain its business model. What about James? I asked, the question I couldn't help but prioritize despite my supposed emotional detachment. That's the most interesting part. Victor leaned forward. According to Charles, James has already approached several private equity firms about backing him in a management buyout. He's trying to regain control of Lefort before Geller can sell to an outside party. Of course he is. The move was quintessentially James. Bold, ambitious, self-preserving. His timeline? Unclear. But Charles is eager to move quickly. He believes the longer this drags on, the more value deteriorates. I nodded, mind racing through implications and potential strategies. We'll need to move fast. Prepare a formal acquisition proposal for Geller's board. Secure financing commitments. Develop a detailed integration plan that addresses the current failures. Already in progress, Victor assured me. My team started working on it last night. And what about James's buyout attempt? That depends on how Charles handles it. If he's serious about selling to us, he can delay or obstruct James's efforts. But we should assume James will fight aggressively once he realizes we're in play. I stood, moving to the window that overlooked Manhattan. The city spread before me, a landscape of ambition and power I had navigated with increasing confidence over the past 4 years. Somewhere out there was James, making his own plans, unaware that his former partner, the woman he had dismissed as damaged goods, was about to attempt the ultimate vindication. "Prepare the offer," I said, my decision crystallizing. "And Victor, make it compelling, not just financially but structurally. I want a proposal so clearly superior to whatever James is assembling that Geller has no choice but to accept." Within 2 weeks, we had prepared a comprehensive acquisition proposal for Lefort Capital. The financial terms were aggressive, full valuation with a premium that acknowledged the strategic value to Chen Strategic despite the integration problems. But more compelling was our detailed plan for addressing the very issues that had plagued the Geller-Lefort combination. We presented the proposal directly to Charles Geller and his board, with me personally leading the presentation. The confidence I projected wasn't feigned. It came from 4 years of building exactly the right expertise and team for this moment. The fundamental problem with the Lefort acquisition wasn't the strategic logic, I explained to the assembled board members. It was the execution approach. Attempting to integrate Lefort's team and clients into Geller's existing structures ignored the unique culture and relationships that made Lefort valuable in the first place. Charles nodded, his expression suggesting he'd reached similar conclusions. Our integration plan preserves what works at Lefort while addressing the leadership and strategic issues that have created friction. We're not buying Lefort to dismantle it or absorb it, but to evolve it into something more sustainable within the Chen strategic ecosystem. The questions that followed were probing but not hostile. The board seemed genuinely interested in our approach, particularly our track record of successful integrations within our transformation fund. As the meeting concluded, Charles asked me to remain behind for a private conversation. "Impressive presentation," he said once we were alone. "Particularly your analysis of where the integration went wrong. You understand Lefort's culture well. I helped build it," I reminded him, "before James decided I was no longer a good fit." Charles's expression suggested he understood exactly what I wasn't saying. "Yes, well, that decision has had interesting long-term consequences, hasn't it? You could say that. You should know that James has submitted a formal management buyout proposal, backed by Criterion Partners. Criterion was one of the largest private equity firms in the country, known for aggressive cost-cutting after acquisitions. And how does his offer compare to ours? Financially? Comparable. But his integration plan, such as it is, focuses primarily on cost reduction and client retention. Your approach is more holistic." I nodded, unsurprised. James had always prioritized immediate financial metrics over long-term sustainable growth. "There's another factor to consider," Charles continued, studying me carefully. "James has a personal stake in Lefort that goes beyond financial interest. It's his name, his identity. His emotional investment will complicate any transition that doesn't maintain his control." "I'm well aware of James's attachment to Lefort Capital," I replied evenly. "But I'm also aware of the firm's performance under his leadership since the Geller acquisition. The results speak for themselves." "Indeed they do." Charles stood, signaling our conversation was ending. "The board will review both proposals thoroughly. We expect to make a decision within 10 days. Those 10 days were among the most challenging of my professional life." We continued normal operations at Chen Strategic while simultaneously refining our acquisition plan and securing the necessary financing commitments. I maintained a calm, confident demeanor with our team while privately cycling through waves of anxiety, anticipation, and doubt. Had I overreached? Was Chen Strategic truly ready to absorb a firm the size of Lefort Capital? And the question I tried hardest to avoid, was this still about proving something to James, despite all my protestations of having moved beyond personal vendetta? On the evening of the 10th day, my phone rang as I was preparing to leave the office. Charles Geller. "The board has made its decision," he said without preamble when I answered. "We're accepting Chen Strategic's offer, contingent on final due diligence and regulatory approval." A rush of emotions, triumph, vindication, disbelief, surged through me, but I kept my voice steady. thank you for the opportunity. We're confident this will be a positive outcome for all stakeholders. I believe it will, Charles agreed. Though not everyone shares that assessment. James was displeased when informed of our decision. He's requested an opportunity to improve his offer. And your response? That our decision is final. Lefort Capital will be acquired by Chen Strategic, with closure targeted for 90 days from now pending regulatory approval. After ending the call, I sat motionless at my desk, absorbing the reality of what had just happened. 4 years after being dismissed as damaged goods, I had built a firm powerful enough to acquire the very company that had cast me out. The symmetry was almost too perfect to be believed. I called Layla and Victor immediately, sharing the news and setting in motion our carefully prepared implementation plan. Within an hour, our core team had assembled in the conference room, champagne flowing as we discussed next steps. To Olivia Chen, Victor proposed a toast, raising his glass. Who saw possibility where others saw only damage and built an empire from the ground up? The team cheered, unaware of the special resonance his words held for me. As the celebration continued around me, I found myself in a strangely reflective mood. The victory felt significant but somehow different than I had imagined during those dark days after James's betrayal. I had expected a consuming sense of triumph, a vindictive satisfaction in having definitively proven him wrong. Instead, I felt a quieter, more profound validation, not of my worth relative to James's assessment, but of the vision and values I had built Chen Strategic upon. The acquisition of Lefort Capital wasn't the end point of my journey. It was simply an affirmation that the path I had chosen was the right one, not because it led to revenge, but because it led to the creation of something genuinely valuable. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. James, congratulations. You've won. I hope it brings you what you're looking for. The message was surprisingly free of bitterness or anger. If anything, it conveyed a weary acknowledgement of defeat. I considered responding but decided against it. There would be time for that conversation later, in person, when I took formal control of Lefort Capital. The celebration continued around me, but I found myself stepping away, moving to the window that overlooked the city lights. In the reflection of the glass, I could see the woman I had become, confident, successful, vindicated, but also changed in ways I was still coming to understand. Damaged goods. The phrase that had once cut so deeply now seemed almost trivial, a misjudgment so profound it had lost its power to wound me. What James had seen as damage had proven to be the foundation of something far stronger than either of us had imagined possible. I raised my champagne glass in a private toast to that journey, not to defeating James, but to discovering the truth of who I was and what I could build from the ashes of betrayal. The formal closing of our acquisition of Lefort Capital took place 94 days later, after thorough due diligence and regulatory review. The official announcement went out on a Tuesday morning, generating significant coverage in financial media. By Tuesday afternoon, I was walking into Lefort's headquarters as its new owner. The symmetry was perfect, almost cinematic, entering the same building where James had cast me out nearly 4 years earlier, but this time with vastly different power dynamics. The security guard who had once watched me leave in tears now nodded respectfully as I passed. The receptionist who had awkwardly avoided eye contact during my exit now welcomed me warmly. Our integration team had been working behind the scenes for weeks, preparing for this transition. Key Lefort employees had been identified for retention, systems had been aligned, clients had been personally contacted to address any concerns. Everything was proceeding according to our meticulously developed plan. Everything except the conversation I knew I couldn't avoid. James's office was on the 48th floor, the same corner suite where our final confrontation had taken place. As I stepped off the elevator, memories washed over me. The shock, the pain, the humiliation of that day. But now those emotions felt distant, almost as if they had happened to someone else. His assistant, not Marissa, someone new, looked up with a nervous smile. Ms. Chen, he's expecting you. Of course he was. This meeting had been inevitable from the moment Geller's board accepted our offer. I paused outside his door, taking a moment to center myself. This wasn't about gloating or revenge. It was about closure, about completing a circle that had defined 4 years of my life. I knocked once, then entered without waiting for a response. James was standing at the window, the same window where he had stood while ending our professional and personal relationships. He turned as I entered, his expression carefully composed. Olivia, His voice was steady, professional. Congratulations again on the acquisition. Thank you. I remained near the door, maintaining physical distance. I wanted to discuss transition plans directly. He nodded, gesturing to the seating area rather than the confrontational setting of his desk. We both sat, an echo of countless meetings we'd had in this office during our partnership. I assume you have a specific role in mind for me, he said, cutting directly to the issue. Or is this a complete separation? The question surprised me. I had expected resistance, perhaps even hostility, not this calm acceptance of changed circumstances. That depends, I replied carefully. Our integration plan includes retention of key LaForte personnel with adjusted responsibilities aligned with our overall strategic direction. Whether that includes you depends on several factors, including whether I can accept working under your leadership. His directness was refreshing after months of strategic maneuvering. Yes, among other considerations. James leaned back, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know, when you first launched Chen Strategic, I dismissed it as an emotional reaction, a way to prove something to yourself after our difficult separation. I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. When you began to gain traction, I saw it as a direct challenge to LaForte, a personal attack that required an aggressive response. He sighed, running a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture I once found so charming. It took me far too long to recognize what you were actually building, not just a competitor to LaForte, but a genuinely different approach to investment strategy, one that has proven remarkably effective. His acknowledgement was unexpected and strangely deflating. I had prepared for denial, for minimization of my achievements, for some attempt to diminish the significance of this moment. His apparent sincerity left me momentarily without response. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Because I owe you that recognition at minimum. He met my gaze directly. And because I want you to know that I understand why you're here today, why you built Chen Strategic the way you did, why you pursued LaForte so specifically. Do you? I challenged, finding my footing again. Why do you think I'm here, James? Because I called you damaged goods, because I dismissed your value and your potential, because I treated you as disposable. His voice was even, matter of fact. And you needed to prove definitively that I was catastrophically wrong. Hearing him articulate it so precisely was disorienting. This wasn't how I had imagined this conversation unfolding. Is that an apology? I asked, unwilling to make this easy for him. An acknowledgement? He clarified. Recognition of reality. You built something extraordinary, Olivia. Something I didn't believe was possible. Whether that was motivated by proving me wrong or by your own vision doesn't change the achievement. I considered his words carefully, searching for the manipulation, the strategic angle. But all I found was what appeared to be genuine recognition of changed circumstances. To answer your question, I said finally, we don't have a specific role identified for you in the integrated organization. Our assessment suggests your leadership style is fundamentally incompatible with Chen Strategic's approach and culture. He nodded, unsurprised. I suspected as much. The separation package is generous, above market standard. It recognizes your founding role at LaForte while acknowledging that our paths diverge from here, and requires a non-compete, I assume. 3 years, the same term you once tried to impose on me. The symmetry was deliberate, though not vindictively so. Simply appropriate. A slight smile crossed his face, acknowledging the irony. Fair enough. As our meeting concluded with unexpectedly civil agreement on transition details, I found myself studying James with new eyes. He seemed different, humbled perhaps by defeat, or simply accepting of changing realities. The arrogance that had once defined him was muted, replaced by something more reflective. At the door he paused, turning back to me. For what it's worth, Olivia, I was wrong. Not just about your business potential, but about us. About who you are. The mistake was mine, not yours. The words I had once longed to hear now felt strangely hollow, not because they weren't sincere, but because they no longer defined my sense of self-worth. I didn't need James's validation anymore. I had proven my value not just to him, but to myself and to the market at large. Thank you for saying that, I replied simply. It means something, just not everything. He nodded, understanding what I wasn't articulating. Goodbye, Olivia. I wish you success with what you're building. It's already remarkable. As I watched him walk away down the corridor, a complex mixture of emotions swept through me. Not the vindictive triumph I had once imagined, but something more nuanced, a sense of completion, of circles closing, of wounds finally healing. I turned and walked in the opposite direction, toward the future I was continuing to build. Not defined by James or his assessment of me, but by my own vision, values, and demonstrated capabilities. Damaged goods. The phrase that had once shattered my world now seemed almost meaningless, a fundamental misreading by someone who had failed to see what was actually there, not damage but strength waiting to be fully expressed. The empire I had built wasn't just a response to those words, though they had been its catalyst. It was an expression of possibilities I might never have discovered without that moment of devastating rejection. In the strangest of ways, James's cruelest dismissal had unlocked my greatest potential. As I stepped into the elevator, I took one last look at Lefort Capital's reception area, now part of Chen Strategic's expanding ecosystem. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace, of mission accomplished, of vindication not just professional but deeply personal. I had built an empire and bought his company. But more importantly, I had built myself into something stronger, clearer, and more purposeful than I had been before. Not despite being called damaged goods, but because of it. The true victory wasn't in the acquisition or in James's belated recognition of my value. It was in the woman I had become through the journey, someone who no longer needed external validation to know her worth. Someone who had transformed pain into purpose, rejection into resolve, betrayal into triumph. As the elevator doors closed, I smiled at my reflection in the polished metal. No longer damaged goods, simply undeniably myself.